The Houston Outlaws have had a turbulent season up until this point, and the team hit rock bottom in Stage 2, during which it went 0-7 with an abysmal -20 map differential. However, the fan favorite is looking revitalized following the mid-season break. The Outlaws have so far nearly beaten New York, put on a clinic and wiped the floor with Boston, and, most importantly, handed us what might very well be the biggest upset in Overwatch regular season history, pulling out the 3-2 victory over Stage 2 champion San Francisco Shock. To pull off an upset of such magnitude, you practically have to have some pocket strats lined up and certainly cannot afford to mirror the Shock, who have proven to be the strongest 3-3 team in the league. Houston DPS player Jake acknowledged as much in his post-game interview, suggesting that the team ripped apart its game plan after the Shock dominated the mirror matchup on the third map. Instead, the Outlaws chose to leave Dante in the game and opted for strategies which they had never practiced to close out the 5-map set. As mentioned, Ikevalda was a one-sided affair in Shock's favor, but so was Lunar Horizon Colony. Houston attempted to break the Shock's defense with a quad DPS attack, something San Francisco is uniquely equipped to handle behind Rascal's stellar Batiste play. These two maps were complete shutouts for San Fran, so we won't talk about them in this review. Instead, we will focus on the 3 maps that the Outlaws actually managed to steal, break down their keys to victory, and see exactly how the Texas side won in NEPAL, HAVANA, and ILIOS, map by map. If you're only interested in a certain map, you can find the relevant timestamps in the description down below. And now, this is how the Houston Outlaws slayed the Kings. So as always on control maps, first fights, neutral fights, it's going to be a little bit of a gamble. You have to kind of guess what your opponents are going to play, and if you roll out in the wrong composition, you might have to swap up your picks. And here, Shock rolls out on Moira floats, which sort of suggests that they expect Outlaws to play some kind of a DPS lineup, certainly not expecting the Sombra Goats, because in that case, they would just roll out with their 3-3, being one of the best 3-3 teams in the league. And as soon as they see that Outlaws has a Reinhardt, that they're playing the Sombra Goats, they go back to spawn and switch. Now, in general, when you have to go back to switch like this, like the Shock are doing, you pretty much have to give up point control, and you pretty much have to give up the points. So the Shock could just potentially roll out on this right side right here, and just take the neutral fight, with Outlaws having point control, but there's still no ults on the board. You still have the advantage in the neutral, but instead, the Shock try to contest the point. They don't want to give up the point for free. So this is a risk that they're taking. Obviously, they would rather cap it first, but they also are retaking from a worse position, right? They're retaking through the stairs because they have to rush to the point. And they are rushing a little bit. As you can see here, Violet is still not quite in the fight because Moth had to boost him back. The point is opening up in 2 seconds, and Shock is already taking a lot of damage just walking up to this fight. And they also have to use quite a bit of resources. You see, Super just got his armor pack. Sinatra's also taking a bit of damage. You can see Rascal's armor pack is on cooldown here. So already, Shock not only doesn't have superior positions for this retake, they're also a little bit split, and they're down in the HP department as well. So even though they sort of have the superior neutral fight composition, they're still a little bit behind, and it's going to be very difficult for them to touch here because they can't really push in as a team, which means Choyobin, as you can see here on the right side, at the same time as Super tries to take space, Choyobin also flies in to kind of touch the point and relieve a little bit of pressure from Super, because if Super just steps in here on his own, you can see off angles looking very good here for Houston, and he would most likely just die, or at least take so much damage that he has to fall back and lose the fight. So Choi just kind of wants to fly in, contest the point a little bit, but as he's doing that, Dante, who's playing on this off angle right here, gets the hack. Right, so as soon as the hack comes out, Super is still not very healthy. Even though Muma's shield is pretty low, it's very difficult still for Shock, to push in here because they are low on HP. They don't have their Matrix, so the damage mitigation advantage that they should have in this neutral fight really isn't there because of this. Bonk almost dies here, a little bit of risky positioning. And you can see now Super's focus has to switch on protecting Choi, making sure that he doesn't lose mech. But he loses mech, and Shock pretty much have to disengage a little bit. Both Reinhardt spin, neither hits. I think Super got booped there. And the cap goes over to Outlaws anyway. So now the Shock are no longer in rush. They've lost the initial plan was obviously to contest the point, win the neutral, but they've kind of lost out in this sense. They've already given up the points, so they might as well recharge their resources and just retake when they're ready and when they're healthy. And obviously still, Outlaws don't want to give up their superior positions and corner control on the point. They're still very reliant on their ultimates. They don't brawl as well as Shock, so they're fine playing this slow as well and just trying to milk time. And as you can see, Choi is slowly farming up his mech here. Muma takes a lot of damage here. Again, I think his shield must be pretty low here still from the initial engagement. Actually, no, it is full, but he takes a ton of damage, and Raucus has to nade. So major cooldown down for the Outlaws, which is clear that Outlaws read into this, right? Like that's one of the biggest cooldowns for the Outlaws. But also Outlaws with this lineup, they want to kite anyway. They're gonna give up this corner most of the time anyway, and they're basically just gonna play for Nano, and they're gonna try to relieve pressure with their ultimates, which is, as you can see, Raucus is coming up on his ultimate. It's gonna be, other than Super's ultimate, it's gonna be the first one on the board. So I see Muad still takes a little bit too much damage. He has to kite back here, but now Raucus has his ultimate, so he can actually just save Muma potentially, or use it on Linkster and tempo shift here. Super goes for a shatter, hits Boink, but Boink actually bounces off of the point. So this is very, very big, because if the shatter did hit Boink and Boink's body just ends up lying here, this is a free kill for Shock, and this might be the end of the fight. But thankfully for the Outlaws, Boink bounces away here. Linkster gets the Nano, which also, Choi probably wanted to finish off Boeing, but since he got the favorable bounce to the side, he ends up a little overextended, and the Nano goes on Linkster, who can catch up and actually surpass Sinatra in grab charge. Choi gets absolutely chunked here. Linkster gets his ult. Jake also pops his rally, so now Outlaws have lapped the Shock in ultimates, and they can retake this space. You can also see Raucus hitting a very nice sleep on Choyobin. He did this consistently throughout the match, which means that Linkster is now free to grab. He doesn't have to worry about Matrix at all, so he's free to grab. And he lands a very big grab. And again, if we look at Raucus' POV, this is where he makes another big play, because Violet naturally responds with a Transcendence. He's already farmed it up. There's also no bubbles, I believe, on the side of Linkster, so Muma can't really swing freely into this grab because there is no target bubble and there's no damage mitigation from the D.Va. So, and he can't really pin without a bubble either. So whether Outlaws can kill in this grab or not really depends on whether Raucus hits an 8. And as you can see here, he sneaks in very nicely and hits a big one on everyone. So a lot of big plays by Raucus here. And this basically turns the fight in the Outlaws' favor. Now, heading into the next fight, Outlaws have used a lot of ultimates, but they still have a lot of tools to work with. They have the EMP, they have the Shatter, and they also have the Beat. And again, most of the time, they're going to use these ultimates to relieve pressure, because Shock is just going to want to push forward. They're going to want to engage first. And now, at this point, Shock definitely knows that Dante has his EMP. So their priority becomes to just make sure that Rascal and Sinatra get their ultimates off. So they know that EMP is going to probably come out very early in the fight, and both Rascal and Sinatra want to just use their ultimates before that happens. If they do that, if Rascal's rally gets a couple of ticks, then he can potentially keep his team up even after the EMP comes out. And if Sinatra can grab, then even if Dante EMPs, it might be difficult for the rest of the Outlaws to follow up on that EMP, because they're obviously going to be stuck in a graviton. So that's basically how both these teams want this matchup to play out. But still, Outlaws do have 2 more ultimates. They have map control. They also have energy advantage. Linkster is sitting on 74, while Sinatra is sitting on 0. So still a lot of advantages for the Outlaws here. As you can see, Chuobin takes an off angle here on the right side. He also wants to stay away as far possible away from the main group that is most likely going to get EMP'd, so that he can potentially, again, provide some damage mitigation to help his team survive the EMP. And as you can see, Sinatra immediately grabs, so the grab is out. You took the first step if you're Shock, and again, there's no Diva Matrix on the side of Atlas. You can do this every time. Rascal immediately pops it as well. So even if the EMP comes out here, you have a pretty decent chance of saving Violet. Rascal also immediately turns around and pre-armors Violet, I believe. Or he might not have done that. He might have used it on someone else. Might have used it on Super. But still, the armor is sticking on Violet, and the EMP comes out. It hits 4. Choyobin, taking that position in the beginning of the fight, actually dodges it. It hits Sinatra. It doesn't hit Super. And now the priority for the backline becomes to save Violet. And also, this EMP is interesting because it came off of Dante's Translocator placement, which was here. You know, he waited for Shock to engage, he translocated here, got a very nice angle, and he did hit 4 people with this. Now, Boink immediately responds with a beat as well, as you can see. And this is very important because the beat hits everyone, and in general, like, Dante is already pretty low HP here without the beat. So most of the time, Dante would immediately have to translocate out, but remember, he does not have a translocator because he engaged with his EMP with the translocator right here. And if he wouldn't get the beat here, he would not be able to actually stay in this fight, and he would most likely just die because he has no translocator, right? It's on 3-second cooldown right now. So this beat allows Dante to stay in the backline and bother the backline, which means that Rascal has to kind of stay and protect, Rascal and Moth have to kind of stay and protect Violet from Dante. And Choi is kind of in a tricky spot where he kind of wants to follow up on the grab, he wants to protect Super, but there's also Dante bothering in the backline. So still a very good spot for the Outlaws. And if we watch Rox's POV now as well, again, hits a big sleep on Shoyobin. So now the damage mitigation is gone. Super naturally wants to follow up inside the Graviton. He goes for a pin, he hits Jake, but since the beat is already out, he can't really secure this kill. And now his biggest friend, like the only person on his team that isn't EMP that has his ability is available at his disposal that could protect him and try, like, after this pin could potentially get him out with his Matrix, is now slipped. So basically, the entirety of the team is disabled except for Super, and they can't convert the kill because of the EMP. And these guys can't really push forward that far. Obviously, Dante's bothering them, and he's healthy enough with his with the barrier. And now the focus shifts onto Super. Dante's positioning has kind of split everyone up. Violet is still low, so he wants to back off a little bit. And when Super went for this, he would probably survive this if Choi actually could Matrix him out. But now Dante can help his team isolate Super, and the entire focus shifts on focusing down Super. Obviously, Choi gets woken up here, but he's, it doesn't really matter because Super has taken too much damage. Super also hasn't been getting the rally from Rascal because, Rascal had to, again, protect the backline. So Super's in a lot of trouble here, and because there's still no support ultimate available inside of Shock, he ends up dying. This opens it up for a Shatter cleanup for Muma, which maybe we would say maybe we don't need that ultimate, but it's fine to clean up because Rascal has his rally going. There's a lot of healing, so it's not too bad. So now Outlaws have put themselves in a decent spot to close this map. They forced out those 2 ultimates. They used the 3 that they had at their disposal. They get a nice stagger on Choi here. And they're basically in last fight territory. Now they don't have that many tools to work with for the next fight. They have, again, they can't brawl. They want to kite back and give up a little space, and they have to really use ultimates to keep that space. And now they don't have many ultimates to do that. But it's important to see Dante here because him getting his EMP is going to be crucial, and he actually gets a nice farming rotation here in the spawn of Shock. While the rest of the team is regrouping here and waiting, he actually gets the hack on Choi and gets a lot of charge here. He farms up to 30%, I think. And that's huge because now he's basically potentially one rotation away from getting the EMP, which is a game changer. Again, Shock has ultimates. They're coming up on double support ultimates. They have 2 tank ultimates coming up as well. But they don't have the Graviton either, so Shock doesn't have a really reliable engagement tool in the Graviton where they can just lock the enemy team up and kill them. Whereas now Linkster does have his Graviton, so as Outlaws are giving up space here, he should be able to lock Shock up and buy a little more time for Dante to catch up on his ultimate. Again, Muma takes quite a bit of poke here, and again, this isn't too bad because the Outlaws managed the distance pretty well. And Raucous, again, Raucous started at 60%, but now he's almost up to a nano, which, again, one very, very important ultimate to relieve this pressure, to potentially save someone who's low and buy a little more time. And Shock can't really close his distance fast enough before Muma retreats and gets healed up by Raucous. Gets a bubble to survive, guides back a little bit. And now, again, very important to watch Dante here, because he's bothering the backline a ton here in this game. And as he pops out here, let's take a look at how Shock reacted, because now Shock has secured positions on the point, but again, they don't have a reliable engagement tool. Yes, they are on point, but they can't really secure a kill immediately right now. And Dante starts bothering Violet here, and Rascal obviously turns around and immediately gives him armor. Even though the hack doesn't go through on Violet, he still has his trance available to him. You are one cooldown down. You've committed a cooldown to Violet that you don't have for Super in this case. Sinatra also turns around in case Violet might need help, and you see how split Shock becomes, because Dante draws so much aggro, and now even though Super is holding this corner, he's sort of isolated. And again, Linkster does have that ultimate to relieve a little bit of pressure, and they just solo grab Super here. Obviously, Sinatra wants to turn around to help his team. He gets hacked here. Not that big of a deal, because I believe he didn't have bubbles anyway. So he doesn't have self-bubble, which is pretty important, because if he had self-bubble, he could potentially step forward here and block some damage for Super, help him out a little bit. But Dante takes that option off the table, and still, Rascal is very focused on appealing for Violet, and Dante is using corners very well here to split up the team. So now Super really doesn't have a lot of resources here. Muma ends up going for a pin, and you can see all this chaos, this pressure from Dante forces out a mistake from Shock. Violet ends up popping his trance, while Moth tries to use his beat to save Super. And it's difficult to say like whose fault is this, because in reality, Violet started with a position here, but Dante's pressure forced him to take cover back here. And by the time the grab comes out, it's going to be very difficult for Violet to recover this distance and actually save Super, which most likely Moth realizes, so he tries to save him with beat. But again, you end up using two ultimates at the same time, and grab for double support ultimate, great trade for the Outlaws. Even better, the fact that Violet is that far away, it takes time for Moth to get his beat off. They also kill Super. So not only do you get two support ults just for the Graviton in this case, if you're the Outlaws, you also force out, but you also kill Super, and you take his Shatter off the board. So really disastrous start to this fight by the Shock, and now it's pretty much, you can just close this fight relatively easily. There's no real front line for the Shock. Raucous has his Nano, Dante is coming up on his EMP because of that great farming rotation back in spawn. And that's pretty much how the fight ends. Once again, we have Raucous hitting a very big anti-nade here. He hits, he hits Choi, and he hits Rascal. Rascal does pop his rally to try and save Sinatra here, but he is anti-naded. And Jake immediately responds with his own rally and pushes Rascal, because he knows that Rascal can't get healed, so he's free to overcommit for this kill. And again, Dante gets his EMP, and they close this out. And this is something Outlaws did very well. Like, even though Shock ends up using getting the rally off before the EMP comes out, they're very good at focusing Rascal down, or at least securing a kill before Rascal gets to have his rally tick up too much and give too much health to his team. So ends up being a pretty clean round for the Outlaws. First fight, they had the advantage because Shock came out on the wrong comp. Shock also opted to fight for first point control rather than taking a better retaking angle and trying to win neutral that way. Maybe giving up 20%, maybe giving up 20% on the first cap, but potentially winning the first fight. And then after that, Outlaws just played their ultimates pretty well, and Shock ended up making a lot of mistakes with their ultimates. But very, very good pressure by Dante so far. Now heading into this round, the Outlaws roll out on the Hammond goats, while Shock are in the Winston goats. And you have to say that this is a superior position composition for the Shock, not only because Winston goats can beat out the Hammond goats a lot of the time, but also because this isn't the lineup with which you want to run 3-3 if you're the Outlaws. You have Dante and you have Linkster and you have Jake. So you don't have a Diva player. You have one of your DPS players playing Diva. So naturally, just by, if you just think about the skill differential between the Diva players, massively in favor for Choyobin. So you would expect this matchup, this compositional matchup, to be very, very tough for the Outlaws. And now it's going to be, with the ball, it's going to be very difficult to win the fight, the control here, because you obviously don't have the damage mitigation from the ball, from the Winston. And as you can see, Outlaws do have to give up a little bit of space. Outlaws, with this composition, they are very reliant on trying to get value out of the Hammond Slam. And for the Shock, they know they can control the space, and all they have to do is really just avoid getting slammed by Muma. And as you can see, Muma goes in for a slam here. Good distance management by the Shock. Everyone backs off. No one gets hit by this. I think Super does, but it doesn't really matter because you can't really follow up on this. So even though the Outlaws are pushing up here a little bit, looking for follow-up, there's really not much you can do. You've used your major engagement cooldown, and once again, you can't really fight for the space. Dante also has to use his boosters to back off, and now you're basically waiting for either for the point to open or for your cooldowns if you're the Outlaws. And basically, that's what they're doing. Muma ends up going. He messes up his grapple there. So again, Outlaws can't really engage. Muma does pressure the point, which does force Sinatra to rotate the point to match him. And this would be fine for the Outlaws in general, because obviously Sinatra can't really rotate back to this position as fast as Muma can on the Hammond. And Muma obviously immediately abandons the point and looks for an engagement on the right side. But it's still, even if you can get a momentary 6 versus 5 on the right-hand side of the map, you still, again, have to cover a lot of distance with a backline. You've given up so much space, so you won't be able to pounce on this opening as quickly as you would like to if you're the Outlaws. And there's also a med pack on the right hand side. So even though Super gets chunked here, he does have a mega that can top him up. So he's still fine, right? Now, if we look at the fight that's happening on this side of the map, this is also a big difference between the Winston and the Ball. So even though the Ball can kind of get one shots, he can tank a lot of damage, the Winston bubble is extremely valuable in this matchup. So even though you have essentially a 5 versus 3 here, because of the Winston bubble, Shock can actually, and because of the Mega Pack, they can actually survive this for long enough for Sinatra to, and Choi, obviously, to make the rotation back. Super does place his bubble. His backline backs off a little bit. And look at the difference here. Because of the bubble, Jake tries to whip shot someone down the pit, but the bubble blocks this. And also, the Ball's damage is completely negated by the bubble, whereas Super is zapping the entirety of the enemy team. So even though you're in a 5 versus 3 here, you still have the Shock coming out ahead in the trade in terms of health. And because of that, you can just close the fight out, essentially. Again, go into the next fight. Difficult to retake space without the Winston. What the Hammond does have at his disposal is that in a 1v1 matchup, he can potentially push the Winston away. Even though Super has a bubble, if it's a straight 1v1 matchup, Muma has more health. He can potentially force the Super to use his cooldowns defensively, and then maybe his team can take a little more space. But you can see Super is getting a lot of resources here. He had the orb to begin the fight. He got the armor pack, and this is the priority for the Outlaws. They try to push him away. They do push him away, but he's still relatively healthy. He does use his cooldown defensively, but Muma also takes a lot of damage in this trade. He still comes out behind in terms of health compared to Super. And now the Outlaws go to pressure the point. Muma has to go behind the point because he's already half HP, and it's going to be very hard to top him up here as well. And again, even though he does win the 1v1 in theory against Super, this is still not a fair trade in terms of resources. Muma is still discorded. He should have probably waited out the discord before peeking out here as well. Super does have his bubble still, even though he used his jump, he didn't use his bubble, which is very important. He still has the orb, and we also see Violet here on the other side of the map. He also has an angle to shoot Muma. So this is essentially a 2v1, and Muma ends up dying. Even though Muma ends up using his cooldown to try and survive this, he also only has, I think, the Winston in his vicinity by the time he uses his E, so he doesn't get a lot of health in that regard, and he just ends up falling over and dying. And this pretty much ends the fight for the Outlaws. So you never want to lose your retaking fights without forcing out any ultimates. This obviously it benefits the side of the defending side of the team that has map control and point control. Now, if we take a look at how they handle this, again, Muma trying to go for the pressure on Super. Still takes quite a bit of damage. Shock are very good at supporting Super here and shooting back at Muma. And the Shock are playing pretty passively here. They're not rushing things. They know they need to neutralize Muma, and then if Muma doesn't have his cooldowns, that's when they can potentially take space. And also they're really not in a rush here. They do have map control. They do have Super, who they can commit a lot of resources to, who's going to be very, very tough to push away, especially since he has his primal. So they're completely fine. Giving Outlaws some map control here, forcing the Outlaws to go to point. That's where Super can get most value out of his primal as well, right? If we think the Shock would try to engage here, not as much value out of Super's primal. So Super can absorb a ton of resources here with the way the fight is playing out. Again, Muma tries to push Super. Much healthier now. And, he is pushing Super out of the room. Jake also tries to help him, but once again, he gets the armor pack from Rascal. He is still pretty healthy. You're committing 2 people here to the point, but Super still has his bubble. He can relieve this pressure very easily. Rascal also comes up to help him, and they push him away. And still nothing really happening for the Outlaws. No real engagement, nothing really going on. Shocker just waiting for Outlaws to make a mistake here. Muma ends up going in. I'm throwing down the mines here, but really these mines don't accomplish much. Like you're zoning out this corner of the point, but remember, Super still has his primal. He can still buy a ton of time. It's not like the Outlaws can ever capture the point off of this. Rascal is already safe inside. He also has a rally to protect himself with. So even if the Outlaws were to all in Rascal or Super here, both of them have major ultimates to protect themselves. They also have 2 support ultimates who could reach them from this the side. So really these mines don't really, yes, they cut off the rotation for the supports to go this way, but you really, with the way the fight is playing out, you really don't need to take that path if you're the Shock. You can see mines don't really accomplish much here. Outlaws do try to push Rascal and Super there. Super uses his ultimate, and he just isolates Jake. And now Jake is dead. There's no way for Jake to get out here or survive. Moth also joins to follow up a little bit. Sinatra, being the aggressive player that he is, also just uses this timing to pressure up and take a little bit of space. So even though he has essentially 3 people looking at him, he doesn't have to get a kill here. He just has to draw aggro. And you can see he's already caught the attention of Dante. Dante's going to have to come in and help Linkser here because Linkser's pretty low, and he's also drawing the attention of Raucus, most likely very shortly. So that's all he has to do. Pressure up and then kite back. And you have a very favorable trade here. You get the free kill, and there's really, again, not much the Outlaws can do from here. I guess Dante gets baited into this position. He's also discorded, and he can just get demeched by Sinatra. He uses his bomb to try and survive, but the fight is already over. Remember, Jake is already dead, so bombing to remake here really isn't worth it for Dante. Instead, he remakes, he stalls out himself even more. He still tries to survive, and this is just pointing at the inexperience of Dante on Diva. And you expect, once again, this matchup to play out in the favor of the Shock. And because Dante is delaying himself this much, now you don't really have a retake anymore if you're the Outlaws. And because he's still, Dante just died, Sinatra can continue to hunt for staggers. He knows that you're at 82%. If you just get 1 or 2 more kills here, the Outlaws don't have another 6 versus 6, and he goes for it. Very good catch here by Sinatra. You get it once again. You get a kill. You force out a mistake. Choi ends up eating the graviton, and you just end up winning. So this round looking very, very iffy for the Outlaws, as it naturally should, considering the lineups and the compositions. Now, the round on Village, the Outlaws pulled out the Hackfist comp, the comp that was made popular by Element Mystic in the Korean contender scene, and Shakir opt to go path through main, so they voluntarily give up the high ground to the Outlaws. Maybe they did this because they expect the Outlaws to run DPS compositions, and they just want to kind of bunker up on the point. They don't, they want to beat them to the point. Maybe they just want to beat them to those corners. Maybe they prioritize getting good control on the corner rather than taking high ground, which is also very fair. But this does give up the high ground for the Outlaws. Now, once again, the Outlaws can't really push in here and brawl on the point without a significant advantage. Now, Shock is controlling everything. They're really in a dominant position here. So Outlaws need to create some kind of an advantage to be able to push out. And the only way they can do that is, again, if you remember what we talked about in the first round, Dante was really good at drawing attention in the backline. So really that's what they're trying to do here. The Outlaws are. You can see Jake is already in position. He's waiting for Dante to rotate around, and both of them can create a lot of chaos here in the backline, which should open up for the front line to potentially pressure as well. And then it doesn't really become a case of the Shock controlling the engagement or just running over the Reinhardt. Now, to prevent this, they could potentially just give up the corner advantage and rush Muma here. It's definitely a choice. If they were well prepared for this composition, if this wasn't a surprise, maybe that's what they would do. But because they don't do that, because they just control the point, you can see a little bit of pressure. Muma tries to charge up Linkster here, but Jake goes into pressure Choi here, while Dante also finds a hack from this angle. So again, the two flankers have created a very decent open here. They've chunked Choi up into half HP. They've also hacked him. They've neutralized the damage mitigation, and they almost get the DMIC here. Now, what does this accomplish? First of all, you can already see Violet and Moth are turning around to try and save Choi. You also see the front line obviously still has to be focused on the front, because there are still a lot of threats there. But the orb is going over to Choi already. Again, resources are taken away from Super this way. Now Rascal turns around as well. So now 4 people are looking back at Dante and Jake. And Jake is coming around this way, so he and Dante also have a nice little crossfire, because while you're focusing Dante, you're trying to push him away. You want to try and make sure that he doesn't fall for free. Jake is coming in from another angle. So you have 3 angles essentially to worry about here. And now everyone turns around. Almost everyone turns around to focus on that. And you can see if you just look at the directions in which all the Shock players are looking, they're under a lot of pressure. They don't really know what to do. Super has to shield Choi to protect him from getting DMEC, but this also gives Moomba a little bit of room to push in. And remember, Choi is hacked, which means that Raucus can potentially drop and find a good nade here. Like you can see how the angle for an offensive biotic raid has opened up due to the backline pressure. And now you're just shoved into this corner. Immediately, as Muma starts to approach, it seems like Shock says, screw it, we have to go, we have to kill the front line, right? Like now Muma is within a range where we can push without giving up the point. He's already in point, so we can push him here. But once again, no one is looking at Jake. Well, Rascal is, but it's a little late. He's not ready to counter bash this, so Jake ends up getting the kill. And because of all of this pressure, Rascal even misses his bash. And once again, Muma disengages. He knows he doesn't have to do anything. You just have to play to survive. You look at the health bars of Shock. You also see Rascal, who just got biotignated. Right? Raucus ended up hitting a biotic grenade like we talked about, which was the opening with Choi down. So much pressure on the Shock. Once again, the supports are looking back. Rascal is trying to deal with Jake. Violet is trying to deal with Dante. Dante does translocate out, but now Super doesn't have anyone helping him except for Sinatra, who gives him the bubble. Orb is still on Choi. And Super pretty much just falls over because of this. Now, the Outlaws do chase for staggers here, I believe. Actually, no, this wasn't the fight. So they just end up setting up an high ground. So if you look at the ult charges here, once again, no real ults on the board, but Outlaws, because they won the first fight, they will beat the Shock. They will hit their ult spikes a little earlier in this fight. So they do have a lot of tools to work with. Again, Graviton and EMP, the major engagement tools for the Outlaws. This time the Shock, rightfully so, choose to push the Outlaws off the high ground first, try to funnel them on the point, and then really push push the pace there on the point. But once again, they are a little bit behind in ultimates. They will hit them, but they are lagging behind. While Outlaws, once again, likely have to use their ultimates to relieve the pressure on the point on Muma, because Muma is under a lot of pressure with these compositions. So you have to, just like we saw in the Shrine sequence, you have to give a lot of resources to try and survive and hope that Jake and Dante get enough done in the backline. Now, if we take a look at Dante, he's above the point here. You can see you have to give up a lot of space if you're the Outlaws. First ultimate to try and relieve pressure comes out from Muma. He tries to shatter. Shatter doesn't hit, which is unfortunate. But once again, Raucus hits a big sleep on Choi. Again, Raucus, very, very good in this series, was hitting these consistently. He also uses his Nano on Muma. And now you can retake this space. You can relieve the pressure with these ultimates. Jake also goes up for goes in for a hit on Super. Super loses half his HP. And Violet opts to use his trance here for some reason. Really no real pressure. Well, the pressure could be potentially that the EMP might be coming out if he can react to it in time. But if we look at Dante's positioning, let's see, where do we have Dante? Dante's over here, so he really can't hit Violet with his EMP from here. Dante didn't throw in his Translocator either. His Translocator is on cooldown, so this is just kind of an overreaction, I think, by Violet. And in theory, because there's not much cap progress for the Shock yet, you could just disengage here a little bit with the if you're the Outlaws, and then kind of clean the fight up with EMP. However, Muma ends up pinning, and I think this is a very, very big mistake, because he could just hold this corner, or he could pressure up a little bit. Again, wait out the EMP as much as wait out the trance as much as possible. Let down to carry you with your EMP. You are reliant on ultimates if you're playing this composition, if you're the Outlaws. But I think Muma started this charge roughly at the same time as Violet did, so it's a little unfortunate timing, because when he puts himself in this position where he's not playing distance and he's not baiting the Shock in, because the Shock with the strands, they're on the clock. They want to get value out of this. They want to push forward. So they would be coming Muma's way anyway. And that could, again, open up a very nice angle for Dante's EMP. But because he pins so aggressively, he pretty much suicides in this situation. Now, Dante does get a hack on Super. And then Linkser, again, trying to save Muma. All of this happens, again, this is slow motion, so all of this happens almost at the same time. Linkser notices, and he tries to save Muma with his Graviton. But because Muma is already dead, now you don't really have follow-up for this Graviton. And Sinatra's already caught up. He can use his own Grav. He can catch all the Houston players. And even though you've created a pretty decent situation for yourself as the Outlaws, that little mistake, that charge by Muma, and sort of how the timing worked out, ends up kind of costing you here. And you do use a lot of ultimates. You use Nano, you use Shatter, you use Graviton. But you do get out a lot on the side of Shock as well. So now, to retake map control here, it's going to be very difficult for the Outlaws to brawl. As soon as they exit up top here, they're going to get pressured immediately. As you can see, Super's already moving up. And Shock naturally understand that Dante has the EMP. So you can see that it kind of in the spacing that the Outlaws use here as well. Rascal is, once again, he wants to get his rally off before Dante uses his EMP. You can see the off tanks are trying to dodge it here. So in case Dante would come out and use his EMP here, both of the off tanks are ready to save him as well. So nice spacing here by Shock, but Dante isn't going for an EMP play. So the tank line here at top right for the Outlaws, they're just baiting. And you can see Jake is also main, so he just wants to go to the point and team up with Dante. You can see Super pressures forward, Outlaws immediately back off, they don't want to take the fight. Now you have two people pressuring the point here for the Outlaws, whereas Choi is the only one who's relieving the pressure. But he naturally, even if he gets resources, he can't really push these two guys away. You can see that he's losing a lot of HP here. He's getting pushed away, so now he has to ask for help. Violet and Rascal drop to try and help him. And now this is a good time for the Outlaws to come out, because now you've split up the resources very, very well for the Shock. But again, if the Shock turn around and push this, you still want to kite this out. You have the advantage now if you're the Outlaws, because of how hard you've split up the Shock. The Shock isn't ready to 6-man rush a single target, and they're losing the point pressure fight on the point. And you can see Super has to start giving up space here. Because of that point pressure by the two players on the point, you have to give up space. Now the main group of the Outlaws can push up, and that's how they retake the high ground. So just replaying that sequence as well from another angle, because there's something, there's a lot of big plays that happen in this sequence. Again, Choi is under a lot of pressure. He has the orb now. He has to go on the point, but Jake ends up hitting him with a slam, or with a fist here. Choi almost gets demeched. Jake does take quite a bit of damage, and because everyone's fallen back and everyone can sort of hit him, he doesn't really have an escape here. He has to use his ultimate. Choi doesn't quite get demeched, but this does force out the rally from the Shock. So just through point pressure, the Outlaws have negated the high ground advantage. They've almost demeched Choi, and they forced out a rally. Now, if we look at Rox's POV, he just shot out a sleep here. Now, this sleep is super important because it hits Super. So while this ultimate by Jake could potentially be a waste, just because Super is slept, this gives an excellent opening for the Outlaws to capitalize. And again, Rock is very, very big play. Now you see everyone's sort of trying to split up here a little bit by the Shock. You don't want to give Jake a good angle to slam here. And the focus becomes to protect Super. Everyone wants to try to protect Super here. Sinatra, you can see he has his bubbles ready. He just wants to use his bubble to save Super. You can see Muma is going for the pin. Very good bubble timing by Linkser here, because Rascal is ready to stop the spin. If Rascal stops the spin and Sinatra bubbles, then Shock can definitely negate all of the damage on Super and save him. But because the bubble timing is so good, Muma removes the target bubble with a spin. Rascal's bash doesn't hit anyone, and then Jake's ultimate lands and really chunks out Super. Because there's no support ultimates on the side of Shock, this is an easy kill for the Outlaws. So a lot of clutch plays, good fundamental play. And here Dante uses his ultimate. You could argue they didn't really need that. It does put them in an awkward spot for the next fight because they've used two major ultimates here. But you do want to close the fight out pretty quickly, so not too big of a deal. Now, here's when the Outlaws do go for the staggers. They get Sinatra here. You can see Super charging back from spawn. And he goes for the shatter here, in essentially what is a 1 versus 6 situation. There's no one to follow up on the shatter. He runs into Dante. Dante hacks him, gives him a little bit of ult charge. He does secure the kill on Boink, but it's essentially a complete and utter waste of an ultimate by Super here. He does come back to the fight a little bit faster than Boink, being Reinhardt, but it doesn't really matter because, once again, the Outlaws, they're not going to fight for this space. They're going to soft hold up here, and they're going to fall back to point. They're going to use their ultimates to relieve pressure. You look at the ultimates here again, they do have a lot of ultimates to relieve pressure. They have the Beat, they have the Nano, they have Muma's Shatter if you can hit that, and Linkster obviously has his Grab also to relieve some pressure. The Shock don't have to worry about an EMP here, so they can be a lot more reckless in this fight. And they do have two support ultimates coming up as well, so they still have a ton of tools here to win this fight. And still, arguably the better composition by the Shock. The composition that allows you, I suppose, more room for error. Now you can see Dante is ready to take that space that Shock is going to give up when they drop to the point. And once again, he's just annoying and he's pressuring from the backline. Nearly gets a hack on Violet, which would have taken the trance out of the game. But now, knowing that the Sombra is behind, Shock just accelerate the tempo shift. They want to push into Muma. Choyobin, being on the flank, isn't ready to eat this Graviton. So Linkster, to relieve this pressure, to make sure that they don't get much value out of the speed boost here. He sees that Shock is speed boosting. He knows that they would have to give up too much space. So this is a way to relieve pressure. He uses the Grav, and look at how close Dante gets to actually canceling Moth's speed. He does get the hack, but the beat goes off. So very, very close to Dante just completely and utterly carrying this fight. Now, again, not a great composition for the Outlaws to follow up on Gravitons. They don't have the Brig here. They don't have a Divas. So Muma, especially if Linkster doesn't have bubbles, which he doesn't, Muma can't swing in this. He can't follow up on this. So really, now you're just waiting and trying to use your Nano to relieve pressure because you're losing this brawl fight. However, yes, you can see the Nano goes on Linkster here. But Violet also trances in this. So this is, again, very perplexing. And one more double supported by the Shock. Very, very odd for them to be making these mistakes. Again, they know that Dante doesn't have his EMP, so he has nothing to worry about in that case. If Dante did have his EMP, then obviously he could cancel this beat, in which case Violet's pre-trance would give you a lot of value. But in this case, Outlaws aren't following up on this that well anyway. You can see they're just losing out on this. And once again, Boeing has to use his beat to try and relieve pressure. Just look at the health bars of the Outlaws. They're just kind of falling over. Choi overextends again a little bit into Linkster. Has to bomb here. Not that big of a deal. Most likely won't be able to get value, but Boink for some reason opts to go across the point here instead of just taking cover behind his team. I think he started his wall ride just as the bomb started, and instead of trying to kind of backtrack, he ended up going this way. And because of that, he dies. So now the fight isn't really winnable if you're the Outlaws. Jake comes in with his ultimate, but he can't really get any kills here. And you just end up losing this. Move again. Looks for an opportunistic shatter. And the big thing is that the Outlaws do force Sinatra to grab here. And once again, you can see that Raucus once again hits a big nade. He hits one on Super and hits one on Choi. So there is a scenario in which the Outlaws could bring this fight back if Sinatra doesn't grab. If Sinatra doesn't grab, Dante is now coming up on his ultimate. There is no support ultimates on the side of Shock. Dante could potentially take Sinatra's grab out of the fight. And because of this nade, this huge nade, Sinatra has to close this fight out immediately, and he has to use the grab. So once again, Rock is making a lot of big plays with his cooldowns in pretty much all of these fights. So you lose the fight if you're the Outlaws. You use a lot of ultimates, but really not too bad. You forced out the bomb, you forced out the grab, the double support ultimate, partially an error by the Shock as well, but good pressure to force these mistakes. Now, in this situation, Jake has already used his ultimate on the Doomfist. The Shock probably have already figured out how to deal with a two-man point pressure. He just ends up going for break here. And now there are multiple reasons why he might be doing this. Once again, no support ultimates on the side of the Shock. The Atlas really just want to take the fight up here now and try to win with the EMP and rush over the Shock. And with a Brig, you can secure kills a little easier than with the Doomfist. You can, you can bash players and you can easily get those kills. Now again, Rascal pre-rallies as soon as you're within distance to engage. He pre-rallies because he knows that this ult will be taken off the board by Dante anyway. So this is the only ult they have at their disposal right now. He wants to get this off as Dante is going for his EMP. EMP does end up hitting a lot of players. So as you can see, Chiobin was trying to dodge this EMP so that he can potentially come in and matrix his teammates, but he steps into it here towards the end, and he does get EMP'd. Super does dodge it. He's just on the edge, and he does have a shatter to potentially salvage this fight. But as soon as the EMP comes out, again, very good timing on the nade by Raucus. He hits... let's see, he hits Super, he hits Moth, and he hits Sinatra. So a lot of free kills here. You can see very easy to clean up here for the Outlaws. The MP is big enough. Again, you have a little bit of extra sustain with Jake, because if Jake hadn't swapped to the Doomfist here, without the armor pack, perhaps Raucus could die here. Super didn't get EMP'd. He could potentially kill the Raucus here, and there's still a scenario in which the Shock could win this fight. So smart swap by Jake here to kind of relieve the pressure of the initial push and then just close the fight out with the EMP. Sinatra immediately falls over. So does Violet. And then Super once again opts to go for a shatter in a 6 versus 4 situation, while several teammates are still hacked. And he's lost the Discord here with Violet. He's lost Sinatra, the major damage dealer. So even if this shatter hits, almost impossible to imagine a scenario in which the Shock win. And this isn't last fight scenario for the Shock. Even if the Outlaws cap here, they still have a retake. So once again, very opportunistic usage of the shatter. Doesn't get any value. Could have saved it for the next fight potentially, because now you're very, very drained for the next fight. The shatter wouldn't really change the context of the fight too much for this next fight, but it would have still at least given you a wild card ultimate to potentially do something with, because now you don't really have anything. Choi is spawning a little late, so you're gonna have to rush this. You don't have the time to retake high ground anymore because Choi is this late spawner and you're at 91%, so now the Shock have to path through main. And the Outlaws can set up above them and just use their ultimates to close this out. Again, Linkster is going to have his Graviton. Now you can actually follow up on it. You still have Raucus's ultimate. You have Muma's ultimate. So the Shock are in the rush here, and it's pretty much lost. You can see they're rushed across here. Moth takes a lot of damage. Violet draws out the armor pack and the bubble. So you've already used so many resources here if you're the Shock just to cross to the point, just to deal with this high ground pressure. Dante, you can see, is also taking an off angle here. He pulls the aggro from Sinatra, and you're very, very split here if you're the Shock, which opens up for a nice little shatter angle for Muma. You don't really need this shatter to win the fight because of how many ultimates you have. You already have Raucus's and Elixir's ults, but it's a very nice setup because it means that Choi, who also got shattered here, I believe, he can't eat the Graviton. Again, a cue for Linkster to just snipe his Graviton. Very, very good job here by the Muma to make that opening. And as you can see, Raucus in this in this map in general made a lot of plays like that. They CC'd or hacked, either hacked or slept or stunned Choi here a lot of times to open up for those Gravitons. All right, so heading into Havana. Obviously, Houston 2-1 down. Havana, much better map for the Outlaws. Much easier to run the Somber Goats here compared to Eichenwalde. And that's exactly what we see the Outlaws doing here. So let's see how they do. They start off holding pretty close, like most teams do. Certainly, Linkster and Jake are just soft holding this. They can't really maintain the space. You're still playing off of Dante's off angle here. He's got a nice crossfire set up here as well. So you're going to be given a space here if you're the Outlaws and trying to see what Dante can get done. But it's still good for Jake to stay in this position in the beginning, simply because, there's no real risk. You can always get out of here, and the Shock are forced to deal with you, right? Like, as you can see, Moth is immediately going to push Jake off. So you still have to commit a little bit of resources to push Jake off. Jake tries to trigger his Inspire here and immediately just bails. But he did draw the aggression from Moth. Now, this pressure from Dante forces out Sinatra's self bubble. Sinatra came out of this spawn, whereas the rest of the team came out of the other spawn. So he was a little bit isolated here against Dante, and Dante can force Sinatra's bubble first. And this is a big deal for several reasons. First, Linkster is already stepping forward here to charge some energy, matching Super's bubble, but Sinatra's both of his bubbles, they're overlapping, and no one is really shooting Sinatra, so he's not really getting energy off of this. He's just using it to protect himself against Dante. So already Shock is falling a little bit behind on energy in this initial trade. Also, this off angle allows Dante to try and grab a hack of Moth, as you can see here, which again, if Jake isn't playing here, if Jake is just playing behind shield, Moth probably doesn't go here. This hack angle never really opens up, right? So good job by Dante here as well. And again, once the Lucio is hacked, you can't really move forward here if you're the Shock. You have no mobility, you can't catch up to the Outlaws, you don't have any bubbles already, and your Lucio is hacked. And Dante continues to pressure from this angle, and this is a really good angle because he has cover here. He still has an angle on the payload. He can be as aggressive peeking at this as he wants. And you can see Super has to angle his shield. This creates a little bit of space. Muva can step forward. Linkster can also step forward a little bit together with Jake and pressure Choi. So pressure from all angles. And as you can see, Linkster 67 energy. If we look at Sinatra, 29. So you do have an advantage here, and Linkster can do a little bit more than Sinatra at this point in the fight. You see, Sinatra tries to deal with Dante, but again, he's only 29 energy, can't really push Dante away. Dante can still get resources from his team. Again, this angle not only allows him to pressure the payload, but also get resources from the rest of his team. Choi is forced to shift defensively. Jake and Linkster obviously pushed him out. Violet is discorded, so he has to hide here a little bit. And still, Super is getting shot in the back from by Dante. Sinatra's focused here. This allows Linkster to find this bit of an opening where he pushes forward. The front line is distracted. He knows that Moth is still hacked, and he's high energy, so he's trying to make a play here. And he does. He almost kills Violet. Rascal already doesn't have his armor pack. He had to use it a little earlier here on Moth, who got hacked, so Dante's pressure forced out that cooldown as well. So again, resources being taken away from Super and onto the supports. Linkster does get booped back here, but Violet is actually kiting into Dante's angle. So Violet needs to be aware of this. He needs to know that Dante is holding that angle and rotate to this side instead. Otherwise, he's in the risk of dying. Because if Violet just rotates here, and he still has pretty much the same angle, arguably even a better angle than he has here to shoot his opponents, and he's not at the risk of getting shot in the back by Dante. So you would sort of rotate away. Since you can't really contest this armor, you don't want to use cooldowns to push her deeper into this alley because she can just teleport out. I mean, Dante's Translocator, I think, is a good spot. It's here. He can still, even if he translocates out, he can still help the front line. But if you commit cooldowns to try and push him deeper into here, you can potentially put one of your players out of position, in this case, presumably Choi. So good pressure overall. And again, because Violet kites into that angle, he's just dead. Choi also has his Matrix on cooldown here, I believe. Yes, he does. So he can't really save Violet either. And the fight is essentially over off of that. Now, heading into the next fight, we have Dante, who's pretty close to his EMP, but he doesn't quite have it yet. But the stagger kill is big by Jake, because this allows Houston to continue pushing, and it buys Dante a little more time to farm. And again, Super's shield is low here. He doesn't have speed. It's going to take a little while until he gets back into spawn, so a lot of potential to farm ult here. Nice little whip shot there by Jake. And you can see 20% extra for Dante. And now, Shock understand, Dante did so much. Dante did so much from this angle. They have to neutralize this. They have to get a Dante out of here first. And Choi, understands this. He comes out and he spy checks and he finds Dante. And this is big because now at the beginning of this fight, Dante will not be able to play this angle. But still, he got an extra 30%. He has 82%. He teleports behind shield. Let's see, where is he? Where do we have Dante? Yeah, he's still behind shield. And he can just farm up the rest of his EMP behind shield. It's no big deal. And Shock really isn't coming up on any ultimates, so yeah, you're still in a little bit of trouble here if you're the Shock. Now, Muma takes a lot of damage here. Again, no damage mitigation from the Diva. It's going to be difficult for you to maintain shield. He gets discorded. He gets chunked. But you still have a lot of cover to take here. You still have a little bit of a high ground advantage here. I like what Jake is doing here as well. Like, he's contesting Super a little bit. He's poking him. And he's also contesting the cart. So he has to be dealt with as well. But at the same time, this is not that big of a risk for Jake, simply because Linkster still has his target bubble if he needs to save Jake. Mu is sort of out of trouble. Like, he can just take cover here and most likely survive. And if Jake gets in trouble, he can always bash out with the bubble. And also Rascal. Let's see, where do I have Rascal? Yeah, Rascal is still here. He's still very defensive, so he can't really punish Jake either. So pretty big distance between the back line and the front line here. And even though Muma goes low because of this setup, you can't really punish Jake, and you can't really kill Muma. But because Muma goes so low, Sinatra really commits. Like, he sees this kill and he really wants to go for it. But Super is already too low. He can't really push forward. Now Rascal is moving forward. Jake has to be a little more careful. He still pressures a little bit. He whip shots back Super. Really good job by Jake here. Again, Muma just taking cover. Definitely not in trouble. Linkster still has his bubble in case Jake needs it. And because of all of this, like, Super is taking so much damage in this entire trade. And because Sinatra was committing to this kill on Muma, he hasn't really given, he still has his target bubble. He hasn't given it to Super, which means Super had to give up this space as well. He couldn't pressure away Jake. And as a result, you can't take space because you were so distracted. You can see now Sinatra uses his bubble, and in this situation, no one is really ready to push here. No amp for Moth. He's already used it, so you can't really speed boost in. No one is ready to push with this bubble. It just seems like the combos might be a little chaotic for Shock at this point. Sinatra overpushed, didn't bubble. Super got low. He probably called that it was low. A little bit of a late reaction, so this bubble doesn't really accomplish much either. Really, because Dante is coming up in an EMP and Shock knows this, this bubble could potentially be used to prevent some of the EMP follow-up. But regardless, you're in a bit of a pickle here if you're the Shock. And Shock, you can see, like, they try. They understand that the EMP is coming. So if you look at their positioning, Moth just trying to hide here, Choice trying to hide. They're trying to spread out a little bit, but there's really not that much space to spread out. Super seems like he tried to salvage the fact that he got a bubble and overpushed again. You're so split. Once again, you're not going to get a lot of resources here. And the MP is coming, so you're pretty much losing this fight regardless. Even though they were trying to hide here, the Shock did, you're still falling over to this. You still get a 5-man EMP if you're Dante. And now heading into the next fight, like we said, Shock now has an engagement tool. They have the Graviton that they can just snipe at any point, while the Outlaws have to try and use their ultimates to relieve that pressure. They have to try and get their Grav out as well, if possible, even get it out first, force Sinatra to counter Grav, and just try and get out as many ults as possible from the Shock here. But anytime you don't have EMP, it's going to be a tough fight, unless you can go first and gain some kind of advantage. Now, here, Super is taking a lot of unnecessary damage. Like, he's walking up to the payload, he's already taking damage, while Violet is still not out of spawn. Like, he can't orb Super, so you're being a little bit sloppy here. He goes for a fire strike, and now Super has just given up half of his HP for free. Rascal is just coming out of spawn, but he hasn't armor packed him. You have Violet, who still hasn't orbed him. He just came out and he's holding a right click. Naturally, anytime a Zen is coming out of spawn, he's probably going to charge a right click, shoot it, and then look to orb. So Super giving up some HP for free here. The Shock not regrouping properly. Because of this, because Super takes too much damage, Choi is forced to use his matrix. He does this little bit of a bait where he matrixes super, puts it into the wall because he knows Linkster obviously has a grab and he doesn't want Linkster to get off a free grab. But still, super taking this damage, forces out the matrix. Choi puts his matrix down. Now it's on cooldown. And this gives an opening for Linkster to actually grab first. And once again, you want to grab first to force out the ultimates. Anytime you grab, you're probably going to get Violet's Trance. You're probably going to get Sinatra's grab, positive trade for the Outlaws, extend the fight, try and farm the EMP, play for next fight, most likely. Also, Dante, still getting these huge hacks off, gets Violet. And again, very, very important because now this fight is winnable for the Outlaws. There's no trance in the grab. You can, if you can follow up on it, you can definitely win. Sinatra and Linkster do grab sort of at the same time, but Linkster doesn't get caught in it. And that's huge because he still has his self bubble, so he can afford to jump into this grab and finish targets off. Especially because there's no trance and Violet is essentially a free kill. So Raucus does trance here. Maybe you could afford it to not use it here, just because the grabs came out sort of at the same time. Maybe you could have held it for a little bit longer, but it's not as big of a deal. Now you are down a Zen. You also pop Rally if you're the Shock, and Super goes for a Shatter. He hits Linkster, but Rally's popped by Jake, and Raucus still has his trance, so he can still protect Linkster, and this provides an opening for Muma to hit a bigger counter Shatter. So the Shatter ends the fight. And exceptional fight for the Outlaws. You forced out the grab, the Rally, the Shatter, the biggest engagement tools for the Shock, like safe engagement tools for the Shock, from the Shock, are off the table. Now, if you're the Outlaws, you're still in trouble because you don't have grab or EMP, and those are your big ultimates that you want to play around. So really, not a lot of ways you can still win this fight if you're the Outlaws. You only have the beat. It's pretty much going to be your ultimate to relieve pressure, but you're fine trying to force out a support ultimate or two and just losing this fight if you're the Outlaws. You still have a lot of time to go. You've shaved off 2 minutes off the clock already. You're in a good spot here if you're the Outlaws. You also have a little bit of leftover armor from the Rally, which a lot of the members of Shock don't have, and again, that helps you kind of force out some ultimates. Now again, they come out a little bit split here out of the spawn, the Shock do, and Dante has changed his positioning. Instead of playing this angle, he's playing this angle now. So Choi, perhaps expecting that Dante's just going to play over there, maybe he takes this angle, but now we have Raucus sneaking in a Discord. And Dante gets another hack here, which is, again, huge. One more trade, or one more sort of pre-fight trade is starting with Shock having to rededicate resources to someone else, rather than taking a straight-up frontline fight. Jake pushes in as well. Almost get the mech here, the Outlaws do, but, you know, look. The orbs on Choi. The target bubbles on Choi. I think Moth... Let's see if Moth uses his amp. Okay, so he does hold his amp, but regardless, our armor pack as well. Everything's going on Choi, and Super has to also move over here to try and save Choi. So you know you're basically slowed down by quite a lot by this if you're the Shock, and also this gives an excellent opportunity for Dante to once again catch up on ult charge, which he does. Now, there is a scenario in which Outlaws could potentially win this fight if Dante can farm his EMP, and it's a big enough EMP. Now, Jake, a little bit overextended here. Again, he's playing these off angles. He's drawing aggro, and this could still be fine. I mean, he does have his shield bash up in 1 second. Because his shield bash wasn't up, I would have liked him to perhaps have started a little bit further back. I think he started here, and he's backtracking now. But still, he can definitely get out of this position. Linkster does have a target bubble to save him, so not that big of a deal. Again, if he can force a lot of people to focus on him, survive, and pressure from other angles, buy time for Dante, that's completely fine. Now, the issue here is that Linkster misses his bubble. He uses it, he tries to save Jake with it, but he hits Boink. And now Boink is also forced to use his amp to get Jake out of here. And Jake got booped into the corner as well, so he can't really bash out. He ends up here with his bash, but still he gets the amp and he can still get out. Now if you look at how the rest of this transpires, once again Choi does get bashed here, so that's a second target bubble that goes on Choi rather than on Super. So again, Super just robbed of a lot of resources in this match in general. Linkster also steps forward to block some damage to cover for Jake's escape with this target bubble. And now this is an interesting situation because Muma could choose to just fall back and wait for Dante's EMP, or he can put himself here. Now because there is no amp, Boink has just used his amp, you've used a lot of cooldowns, Linkster has used his target bubble. If Muma positions himself here, there's really no way to get him out at this point. Like this position will almost certainly kill him. But also, if you look at how this transpires, even if the shock pushes Muma, they're also a little bit low on resources, right? Like the health bars are already pretty low. You have Sinatra, who doesn't have either of his bubbles. Super is discorded, so even if he pushes Muma here, he's also going to be traded. He's also going to die. So I really don't mind this from Muma. Like even if you sacrifice your life here, a lot of playmaking potential. You're pushing into an area where the other 5 players can shoot you. So nice angles here by the Outlaws. And you can see Super dies because there are no resources for him. Violet tries to save him late with a trance, and already you're really happy about this if you're the Outlaws. Now Choi, I think a hack was starting to Dante was starting to get a hack on Choi, and he does hack Choi, but Choi just barely manages to get his ultimate off just before the hack connects. So hack is off on cooldown now for Dante, but Choi still got his bomb off. So good on Choi to react quickly here, but still completely fine for you if you're the Outlaws. Remember, going into this fight, Outlaws had no real win condition. We said like they're happy if they can force out a trance, maybe another ultimate. They've already accomplished that. So completely fine for the Outlaws to just lose this fight right here. And they do. And Linkster farms up his ultimate. Now the 2 ultimates that we said the Outlaws didn't have for the previous fight, the 2 biggest engagement ultimates, they have them now. They have the Graviton, they have the EMP, they have double support ultimate, they're coming up on a Shatter, so that fight was just exceptional for the Outlaws. And whereas the Shock are now in a very tricky situation. They do have their Grav, so that's a potential engagement tool. They do have Rally, again, another potential engagement tool. And like we talked about on Nepal, you do want to get these ultimates off. You don't want the Outlaws to EMP them off of you. And again, you know that the EMP is coming here if you're the Shock. But at the same time, it's a little bit awkward to go first here on this map, right? You do want to go first, but also you can see it's really reflected in the positioning of the Shock here. They know that the EMP is coming. They're trying to hide Violet. Rascal is hiding here as well. He's ready to pre-armor Violet in case that's needed. The rest of the team is just pretty split, so you're not really in a position to go first with any of your ultimates here. And even if you do, the area is so open. If you push into this area, it's really easy for Dante to use EMP here. So I like what the Outlaws do as well. They roll out top, which means that there really isn't a chance for the Shock to go first. So for instance, if Outlaws went to this path, there's potential for Shock to maybe all in them there. But they start on high ground, they see how spread the entirety of the Shock team is, and then they're free to drop. But they're still managing their distance. They know that Shock is just under a lot of pressure just based on the fact that the EMP is on the table here. And again, you can see that in the positioning. Moth is trying to counter it. Now Sinatra is certainly not going for a grab engage here. He's also trying to dodge it, save his bubble for Super. Maybe they're trying to bait it somehow, but Dante has a lot of patience here. He sees that he doesn't have a great angle here. He doesn't have to rush it. No one is pushing the payload for the Shock. So again, you're not under any pressure here if you're the Outlaws. Just take your time. Boink also goes up to, I do believe, he goes up a little bit to pressure Choi here. So slowly, you're pushing people out as the Outlaws. Eventually, Super commits with the bubble because Shock realizes that we have to do something. Dante has repositioned here, which very good position. He's ready to EMP both the front line and the Zen. Still, nobody pushing the payload. Moth is repositioned here to try and dodge the EMP. So the biggest strength of your composition, if you're the Shock, which is to just brawl W into the Outlaws, is kind of neutralized on this part of the map because of which ultimates are on the board. And Linkster spots it nicely here. He knows that Choi, presumably he knows that Choi has just used his cooldowns. Well, he does have his Matrix here, but Linkster, he finds a Sinatra here, and Choi isn't really ready to eat it. And how do you save Sinatra in this situation, right? Like, you already got the grab off. Moth can't really beat this because of how messed up the positioning is. You can't orb Sinatra, you can't rally him, you can't armor pack him, you can't really shield him either. So very good find here by Linkster to just grab Sinatra here. Sinatra, obviously, the only way he can survive. Counter grab, he has to pretty much counter grab. He doesn't want to get that old EMP'd off of him anyway. But like you see, no way to really save Sinatra here. Now, Rockus uses his trance again to prevent the follow-up from the Sinatra grab. Choi is here to follow up, so this is fine. Just use that trance, not a big problem. Dante also finds a nice hack here on Super. On the other side, once Sinatra is dead, Dante doesn't need to use his EMP anymore, so this fight is essentially lost for the Shock. Sinatra's dead. Your shield is hacked. You have to surrender space. Now, an interesting tidbit here is that Choi started here. He moved up to this window. He tried to follow up on the grab a little bit, and then now he's trying to survive by going here, because essentially when he put himself here, it's going to be very difficult for him to escape all the way over here without getting demeched. So he moved back into that position to try and survive, and that's crucial for the next fight. Because if you look at what happens, Choi is still behind. Now, I'm not sure if the Outlaws knew or were paying attention to that, but Dante translocated out and he spots Choi in here. And that's huge because Cherubin wants to get back. He wants to get back to his team. He doesn't want to put himself in a position where if the EMP goes down here, he's not ready to matrix his team. So he somehow has to get back to his team. Dante spots him here. He gets the hack off. Choi gets a lot of pressure. And once again, another fight that is about to begin that the Shock are already behind in cooldowns and HP. Right? Choi is already chunked to half HP. Another bubble that goes on Choi at the start of the fight instead of Super. So all of this pressure from the off angles from the Outlaws, just again reallocating resources to Choi or someone else. Now, once again, you do have the tools to deal potentially with this EMP. This EMP from Dante. You want to pop rally as soon as possible. You want to try and dodge the EMP with your supports. So still, there are a lot of ways you can win this fight if you're the Shock, but once again, you're starting with cooldowns down. Rascal does pop his rally to pressure forward, but Dante, really great positioning here. Again, once the rally comes out, Rascal is going to be focused on pressuring the front line. He's not focused on trying to cancel the EMP. Great positioning by Dante here. He's in a position where he can EMP everyone. Again, because Sinatra had to use Sinatra's on 0 energy because he had to use his target bubble on Choi. So, you're starting with no energy. You're forcing this engagement a little bit. And Dante, terrific EMP. EMP is very early in the rally before the armor gets to tick up too much. He hits 5 people, everyone except for Choi, and he takes the 2 support ultimates off the board. The shatter comes through, fight over. Now, Choi still doesn't get out. Like, he's still stuck in this position. And once again, it's tricky for him because his team is getting cleaned up. He could try to shift out, but his shift doesn't carry him far. Like, it carries him probably here. And Houston could most likely just push and kill him anyway. Now, do you think the Outlaws know that Choi is there? looks like they might know. Looks like they might have a hunch based on where they're looking. Dante translocates up, gets the armor pack from Jake, starts pushing Choi. And now you're already in a lot of trouble, because once again, Choi is getting pressured out. Sinatra just touched the payload, swaps to the Tracer. Jake helps push Choi. Dima comes out. Chance comes out from Violet to try and save Choi. So once again, think about the situation. You start the fight with 2 support ultimates, but in reality, you just wasted trying to save someone else. And where are the resources for Super here? He doesn't have a Zarya anymore. He doesn't have a Diva, so absolutely no damage mitigation. You don't have the better comp anymore if you're the Shock, because of how this transpired, and really there's nothing you can do here if you're the Outlaws. So Linkster can just carry this fight. You have a lot more DPS. You also have double support ultimate if you're the Outlaws. Moth does have his beat, but again, now Rockus has his trance, and you just close out this fight with the ult advantages. So very good hold by the Outlaws. Very difficult to hold it at this, this far up. And a very big deal to actually stop it here instead of closer to the checkpoint. So going into the Outlaws attack, I want to focus a little bit on the picks that they go for. You can see the entirety of the Outlaws are scouting. And it seems like they want to decide what Rockus is going to play. That's what it looks like. Because Rockus isn't really picking a hero before he sees what flex support the Shocks are playing here. And he sees Rascal on the Batiste. You can clearly see him seeing that, and he ends up going Ana, which is a little bit interesting because, and I thought a little bit about why this might be. So there's multiple ways to look at this. First of all, you're going to be held in spawn very, very hard by the 3-3 composition. You don't have terrific sightlines as Zen on attack here, because it is going to be difficult for you to just get out of spawn. You're going to be taking a lot of damage just going through your spawn doors, which, Ana is pretty good at getting you healed up off of that. And also, once you play the Ana and you're going to be taking a lot of damage and choke points, you might be able to get your Nano up a lot faster than you would your Transcendence. And the Nano might actually be one of the first ults on the board, so you can potentially get value out of that as well. Now let's take a look at how this transpires again. Dante, you can see him on the right hand side going on an off angle. Outlaws aren't looking to push out here. They're just looking to charge energy, and they're waiting for Dante to work his magic. Dante does get a hack on Rascal, pulls aggro from Choi and Rascal, so Dante doesn't have as many resources now because Rockus isn't on Zen. He can't orb him. But at the same time, even if Rockus was on Zen, he could potentially orb Dante from this angle, but he would easily get pushed off. He wouldn't really be able to get a lot of spam off here. So again, the angles here when you're close into your spawn are not terrific for Zen. Not that big of a deal, but it's much easier for Choi to push off Dante in this type of a situation, because the rest of the team is trying to push out through here, try and secure space here, and until this space is secured for the Outlaws, Dante doesn't have as many resources to work with. And his Translocator is forced out. Now, big thing is, though, Linkster is on 68 energy, and Sinatra is on 27. And again, this is going to be really common. You're essentially trading Reinhardt ult charge for Zarya charge if you're the Shock. Super was swinging really, really hard in this choke point. He is 30% ahead of Muma in his on his Earth Shatter, but at the same time, Outlaws weren't really shooting the bubbles. So Sinatra is falling back a little bit, falling behind once again a little bit on energy because of that. Now, a big thing you have to remember is when you are playing Sombra Goats, you don't have the Matrix. So anytime you go for a Fire Strike as a Reinhardt, especially when you're discorded, you're going to take a lot of damage. And here, Choi already forced out Dante. Dante isn't ready to pressure from this angle. And Outlaws are pushing out here. So the timing is a little bit off. If Dante was here already pressuring, kind of taking Choi out of this fight, or at least having a little bit of a one-on-one here. You could be a little more aggressive here for the Outlaws. You could be you could be looking to make some plays potentially, or at least give resources to Dante. But here Muma goes for a fire strike, and again, this is very, very risky when you're discorded, because you're going to be taking a ton of damage. And most likely, as you can see here, Choi just gobbles up the fire strike, so you don't get anything out of it anyway, but you just lose a ton of HP, which, because Dante wasn't ready to pressure in the other angle, you pretty much should lose this space again. So a little bit sloppy here. You could potentially think, well, maybe the Outlaws do want this. Maybe they just want to take damage, and they're playing for the for Rock's assault, for the nano boost, which, you know, you can see here, he nades everyone, he heals up. You can see his ult charge really going up. That could potentially be an idea, that they want to farm that up and bait the shock into them. Because, again, there isn't as much kill catch potential if you're the shock here. You don't have the brig, you don't have the the stun, but you do have a ton of sustain if you're playing the Batiste goats. And once again, maybe another thought process, maybe part of the thought process for the Outlaws, they're playing Batiste, they have a ton of heals, not a lot of kill catch potential, but if we can hit a nade, we can potentially secure kills, we can negate a lot of the value that Rascal might bring on the Batiste. But still, you can see how badly that fire strike got punished. And then Muma opts to go for a pin here, which misses, opens up the Shatter angle. Shatter blocked by Linkser, very nice block by Linkser with his bubble, but there's no way of saving Muma here, really. Linkser doesn't have his bubble anymore. He had to use it, as the team was, as Muma took too much damage on the fire strike. Now Dante is ready to pressure, but already the shock is ready to push. The mistake is made. The timing was off between Dante and the rest of the group, and you're essentially losing this fight. Ruckus almost gets his nano boost. He could maybe save him, but really now the shock can afford to just kill Muma, and then Choi can go back and deal with Dante. And as a result, because the timing is off, because Dante isn't getting as many resources, he is falling behind a little bit on his EMP. He's only at 50%, so difficult to charge here. Now Dante goes behind again, as you can see here on the right-hand side. Choi is just watching him, so they're having a little bit of a one-on-one there. And now Ruckus and the Outlaws decide to use Nano to just get out of spawn. Just try to win this early trade, which is fine. You get the space that you wanted. It frees up Dante a little bit. It forces Choi to help the front line. Now Dante can maybe get a little bit of ult charge. That's the only way you get out of spawn like that. However, Shock is coming up on a Graviton. You don't have anything to eat the Graviton. Still pretty much an unwinnable fight for the Outlaws here, even though they get a little bit of space. Rascal uses his ult, his window, and Sinatra's grab comes out. I feel like they could have saved one of those ultimates. I don't see why you need both of those ultimates. I think you can potentially just grab there and win the fight. But now you use the windows, you use Sinatra's grab, and now you don't have that easy engagement tool into the D.Va-less Outlaws. If you're the Shock, now you understand that Dante has his EMP. He did get a lot more farming time here as the Outlaws pushed out with the Nano. He's trying to set up his EMP. And now you can't really hold spawn anymore if you're the Shock, because there's not as much room to hide. You have to have a counter plan for the EMP, and that's, as you see, that's what the Shock are trying to do here with their positioning. Violet has to dodge it so that he can get his trance off. Sinatra is trying to use corners to maybe dodge the hack and use his bubble and super. Choice on the side as well, trying to dodge it. So good spacing here. Rascal is playing further back as well. Maybe he can snipe his immortality field. But Outlaws realize this. So rather than just rushing the EMP, I mean, Dante's not ready anyway. Rather than rushing the EMP, they just start pressuring super. You see, Jelly Jake takes this angle. He's bothering super. If you're the Shock, you have to peek out and give a little bit more resources. Violet peeks out so that he can try to maintain LOS on super, so the orb doesn't drop. Because if Violet is just hiding and there's no orb on super, then Outlaws can get away with this by just pushing super away. Rascal, I thought he had a pretty decent position here, but he pushes forward closer. because Super steps in here, he presumably he pushes forward to be able to help Super, and this opens up for Dante to get an EMP. Yeah, Violet looking to get the orb back on Super. Orb doesn't have Super doesn't have it. Rascal pushed a little bit forward, presumably to save him there, and this is money if you're Dante. You love to see this. Violet barely doesn't get away with dodging it. And this is really, you know, for him on his screen, he's essentially around the corner. But now there is really no counterplay for the shock. Once again, 5 people got hit by the EMP. Terrific EMP by Dante. A little unfortunate that you can't dodge it if you're Violet, and fight is over. So you can commit EMP and Shatter. But again, you don't really have as good of an engagement tool here if you're the shock. You don't have the Brig, so your frontline trading is not quite as powerful, but you do have a ton of sustain. The Sidelants are good here for the Batiste. You still have the Trance, but that's most likely you're most likely saving that for Lynx's Graviton. You're coming up on a lot of other ultimates here. If you're the shock, you're almost coming up on 6. And this should be a pretty difficult fight for the Outlaws, but they do have map control. They do have let's see. Well, Lynxer is actually sitting on 0 energy, while Sinatra has an energy advantage. So this is a bit of a tough fight for the Outlaws, considering the ult economy. But you do have a bit of an opening if you're the Outlaws. You do have your Graviton here still, and almost the entirety of the shock are on like 75% on their ultimates. So you do have a bit of a window where you can potentially make some plays if you're the Outlaws. Now, I love this angle by Dante. He's waiting for people to drop, and he can always get a nice hack off here, or most of the time. So Outlaws actually engage with the Nano, which I think is a little bit curious. I wouldn't have minded actually for Lynxer to try to find a Graviton, and then a nanoing Muma and trying to pin out or just swinging it, trying to get Muma back, trying to help Muma farm a new Shatter. And you know, there's multiple reasons for that. First of all, Violet is quite far away from the fight, so if you can potentially find a grab here on Super, Violet might not be able to reach him. Muma might get nanoed and kill Super anyway. And also, anytime you grab, if you're the Outlaws, the only way Muma can really follow up inside that Graviton is if he has Nano Boost and Lynxer has bubbles for him. Otherwise, without the damage mitigation from the Diva, you can't really swing. You're going to be giving up too much HP. So I'm not too sure about this ult usage. At the same time, maybe Lynxer can't really find a Graviton here. Maybe he doesn't feel comfortable looking for it this early since he's still low in energy. Since Dante's taking this angle, and Choi is protecting himself from a hack here. Dante doesn't have a hack on him here. Maybe he calls that he can't hack Choi. Because of all of this, maybe that's why they opt for the Nano. But again, for the reasons I outlined, I wouldn't mind Lynxer just trying to find a grab here first and then nanoing Muma. You're still going to get the trance out, but maybe you do have a bit of an opening while Violet tries to catch up to the play, since he's kind of split. Now, Lynxer is trying to pressure Choi here. He does want to get his Graviton off. He wants to push Choi off of out of this position. Now, again, once Nano comes out, you have to give up a little bit of space if you're the shock, but you can't afford to give up too much space because this is the checkpoint. So now it becomes a bit of a struggle for the shock because you have to think about the objective while also allocating resources properly. Because Choi is here, the Fire Strike lands for the shock. But now you're in trouble. You haven't gotten much value out of your Nano Boost here. You didn't really get much out of it at all if you're the Outlaws. Now Dante, we actually missed it in the camera, but he was looking for a hack on Violet, and he almost got it. Once again, he almost got the hack on Violet. Violet stepped forward here, and then he backed off. If the hack lands on Violet, Trance is out of the game. You grab, you potentially win the game right there if you're Lynxer. But still, very strong angle for Dante here that he's playing. And he does get the hack on Rascal, which also is important because you're taking the immortality field off the board. One of the biggest, one of the biggest pieces to the chessboard that Rascal brings with his Batiste. And Linkser goes for his grab here. A little bit risky. Choi still hadn't used his Matrix, or had he? Let's actually take a look at that. Alright, so let's take a look at Choi here. He did use a ton of his Matrix. Not all of it, but a lot of it. He shifts up here. He does have his Matrix, but Linkser uses it. This timing is really... Choi might have just as well have eaten it, but while he was flying, he wasn't really paying attention to Linkser's position, and his Matrix was on cooldown while he was still here. So Linkser really threads the needle with his ultimate here. But still, if you look at the ultimates, very hard follow-up. As I said, you can't really swing into this if you're Muma. Great boob by Moth to further distance the Outlaws from the Graviton. Violet comes in with the grab, and really there's no way for the Outlaws to follow up on this. Linkser still doesn't have his target bubble. Muma's discorded here, so he can't really step forward, even though he has Nano, and the Nano's wearing off. Rockets isn't really in a position to get a nade off into it either, so not much that you've gotten out of these ultimates so far. You've traded Grav and EMP for Trance, so far so good for the Shock here. Let's take a look at Rockets here. I do believe he looks for a nade here, but very difficult to get a nade off from this angle. Unless Super angles his shield far right here, this nade doesn't really hit anyone. And Super actually tries to block it as well, so good awareness there by Super. Muma tries to step in and follow up on it, but again, there's nothing you can do with this. This is part of the reason why I would have preferred Rockets to save the Nano and Nano Muma now, so that he has a little bit more freedom to step forward. Maybe he can try and find a pin on Sinatra or Super. But then again, that's not particularly reliable either, simply because Sinatra has his grab either. So if Muma steps forward here, even with the Nano at this point, he gets grabbed and there's not much he can do anyway. Now, the target bubble doesn't go on Muma. Linkser, if you remember, when the graph came out, his bubble was on 3-second cooldown. And the bubble still goes on Dante here, which is big, because I think he gets a rehack on Rascal here. He gets a rehack on Rascal. Rascal doesn't have his ultimate, which, again, very important. In this situation, he could get a ton of value with his ultimate. His immortality field, I believe, once again, off the board. He hasn't been able to use his immortality field for 2 fights, for essentially 2 hack rotations. The Graviton does come out from Sinatra, but Boink still has his beat to block. But now you're completely drained of your ultimates. You've used everything. If you're the Outlaws, you're still behind in ultimates. You still like Shock's chances here in general. Which is why it's very, very important that Dante gets this hack, because not only does this take one of the ultimates off the board for Shock and evens out the playing field a little bit, it also draws a lot of aggression. Because if you look at this, Rascal is clearly calling that he needs help here. And Moth doesn't have his beat yet. Violet is obviously focused on the grab, so Moth is the first responder to the scene. Sinatra also clearly hears, Rascal is a very loud player. You can tell that he's screaming here. He's begging for help. Sinatra also turns around to try and push Dante away. But if you remember what we talked about on NEPAL, anytime a Boink beats and the beat can touch Dante on an off angle as well, it becomes almost impossible to push Dante out, which is what happens here. Beat hits Dante. So even though Moth is trying to push, Moth and Rascal are trying to 2v1 Dante here, he has the beat. You can't push him off of here. Following his trance, Violet also goes into this position, which is very, very risky. The beat is out. The 2 other supports that could potentially help him are not there. They're trying to deal with Dante. So this position has the potential to throw the fight as well. The beat buys a little bit of time for Outlaws. Now you just have to survive if you're the Outlaws. Try and punish Violet. Try and punish Rascal. That's pretty much what you're playing for here. Obviously, try to block Super Shatter. Still a beat on the side of Moth that could pretty much secure this fight. But once again, Moth is not focused on the fight. He's focused on trying to keep Rascal alive. As he goes for the boop, he puts a bit of a distance. As he goes for this boop, he puts enough of a distance between him and Dante so that Moth can't reliably hit a shot, which gives Dante an opening to hack Moth. Now, when Moth is hacked, now you've taken the beat out of the fight. Now this is very, very winnable for the Shock. Now you can never get Violet out of this position. As you can see, Jake immediately notices this, goes for the play. Linkser clearly hears the call from Dante that Moth is hacked. Now he's going to be helping push this backline. And if you're the Super, what do you do here? Your backline is getting pressured, your Zen is getting pressured, you want to save your Zen, but if you overpush while the rest of the Outlaws are wrapping you from either side, you know, you're probably going to die yourself. You still can't give up too much space because the payload is nearing the checkpoint. He turns around, tries to figure the situation out. Rascal does get his windows off to try to save Violet, and Super doesn't save Violet because Violet's positioning is very bad in that fight. Now Choi is just desperate. He just bombs to try and relieve some pressure. Something has to happen, or the Shock are just falling over in this fight because they're losing both of their supports. Linkser, very, very aggressive with this, going for this play. He knows he needs to take the beat out of the fight permanently to win this fight. Dante still sitting on a very nice off angle. Look at these positions for the Outlaws. You're all over the place, and you're not allowing Shock to really play their game here. Sinatra is also forced out of the fight, trying to peel for Moth. Super is just completely abandoned. Rascal turns around now. It's so hard to know what the right play is and where you need to go here if you're the Shock. You've completely lost the tempo in this fight. Super tries to go for a shatter, but yeah, you're just losing this fight. So terrific pressure from the Outlaws. Once again, great prowess with the Sombra composition. Dante getting a ton of value out of these off angles. He gets to stay and play those angles for a really long time. Good resource management, providing those resources for Dante, and really just Dante getting off these manual hacks on key targets, and then Violet over positioning a little bit up front ends up winning this fight and this map for the Outlaws. All right, so heading into ILIOS, Outlaws just won Havana, once again, captured the momentum. As I mentioned on the first map, controlled very volatile game mode, very important that you roll out in the right composition. Shock, if they can just kind of force a 3-3 mirror in any kind of way, they want to do that. Outlaws obviously will never ever let them do that on controlled maps as long as the architecture of the map allows that, as long as the architecture of the map makes any other compositions viable. So let's talk a little bit about the compositions that both teams roll out with here. The Outlaws, as Jake mentioned before, or rather after the game in his post-game interview, never practiced this composition. They have, however, practiced these Orisa compositions on well a ton. They're notorious for, even when sort of everyone started running Winston goats on this point, the Outlaws have always liked their Orisa, and this is a pretty good point for Orisa. You have this death pit in the middle. You can rotate around. With the Orisa, you can boot people down or suck people down. And if you look at the Outlaws composition, basically that's what you're trying to do. You have Muma, who is just going to try and contest the point. He's going to be consistent point pressure on any given corner. Boink is essentially there to peel for him and to escort him around the map, because really what Outlaws want to do is they want to put Muma on a corner and then have him rotate away from the Shock. As long as he can put himself at a diagonal angle from the Shock, it's going to be very difficult for them to cross as they're making these rotations. Again, a lot of boot potential, both from Jake, from Boeing, from Muma. And while the Shock are making these rotations, as long as Muma can stay alive and just run around and keep that point presence, Jake is going to poke them down, and eventually Linkster can potentially find a pick as well. Now, Linkster doesn't have a lot of resources to work with as Doomfist on this composition. He very, very difficult for him to play into this comp. Basically, he has to essentially just stand AFK and wait for some kind of a mid-fight opening. Now, the Shock roll out with Roadhog Goats, which suggests that maybe they expected the Outlaws to run a 3 DPS composition with a Hammond, perhaps, something along those lines. Outlaws did run Hammond on the Sanctum, I believe. That was it, yeah. So, maybe that's the read that Shock made. Maybe that's the guess that they made. But ultimately, Hog against this, not too great. You can't really do that much. But at the same time, for Linkser, very, very difficult to play into this composition. A lot of CC on the side of Shock. The Roadhog can also hook you. So really, as I mentioned, if you're a Linkser, you're really pretty much just going to be standing AFK here, wait for your team to work their magic, and maybe find some kind of a mid-fight opening. That's basically how you're going to play in the neutral. So you can see that Super here in the first fight is splitting. Now that they've scouted the Orisa, basically what you want to do, again, Muma wants to rotate away from the main group, buy time for his team. The Shock want to cut off that rotation, right? You don't really want Muma to just because in theory, if you look at the map like this, like Muma could just rotate infinitely. So what you want to do as Shock, you want to pincer him in and make sure you cut off the rotation somewhere, which is what this positioning essentially means. Super can push the right side, Shock can push the left side, and potentially you can surround Muma and at the same time have Choyobin try and mark Jake, fly to Jake, and make sure that he doesn't get too much done as you're closing the distance on Mua. Basically, that's what these two compositions want to accomplish. So if you look at how the first fight plays out, Muma positions himself in that little corner. You have Dante taking this very, very nice off angle just before the rotation starts. Shock obviously will want to push through this house and try and hit Muma from this side. Muma backs off a little bit. He doesn't really know where to go. His shield is going low as well. He doesn't want to risk getting hooked. Still, the point hasn't opened, so all the time in the world for the Outlaws here. Now, Dante is biding his time here. He's not rushing it because the Shock aren't really making their move. Dante doesn't want to come out of Invis here and just basically get a hack, farm a little bit, get forced out, because then the rotation is free, essentially. So good little patience here for Dante. As mentioned, Muma repositions himself. He puts himself at a diagonal angle from the main group, from the Brigitte, from the Brawl group. But Super is still controlling the side, so it's not impossible to potentially catch Muma in this situation. And Dante comes out now, just as the rotation starts. Just as Shock wants to start their pincer move, he comes out and he catches Moth. And that's huge, because the point is opening in 6 seconds, and without speed boost, there is no way you can catch Muma. Now, Linkser and Boink are also here to sort of cover this side for Muma. If Super is the only one who's here, they can push him away. And because Moth is active and there's no speed boost, this group is essentially stuck in this corner as well. So already looking very, very good for Outlaws. It's going to be very difficult to execute your win condition here for the Shock. The bubble goes on Choi. Choi starts matrixing Dante's damage, which allows Jake to just sneak in a rocket from this angle. Matrix is directed there. Moth is hacked so he can't get healed up, and the rocket gets the kill. So very nice setup here for the Outlaws. Good angles, good positioning, and yeah, Dante also manages to pull Choi really far out of the fight. Like, Choi is completely split from his group, and regardless whether he was or not, this is not really a fight you can win anymore with Moth dead. Because Muma is just going to capture the point. You don't really have a main tank who can step on the point with a shield and contest it either. You have a Roadhog, so not a lot of point presence from Shock's composition here. Now, something to take note of as well is Shock realized this. We can't really win this anymore. We probably need to swap up. The main group starts rotating back to main, but Violet for some reason stays here. And he goes for a little bit of a flank. There's nothing he can do with this flank. They're not going to shoot down the shield. There's still a Sombra and on the side of the Outlaws. You don't know where Dante is. He has just translocated out. You never want to isolate yourself like this if you're the Zenyatta. Now Super peeks out a little bit here, goes for a hook. Could have potentially hit Raucous. This is very close. If this hook hits on Raucous, still a very winnable fight for Shock. Moth gets back. There's no real healing for the Outlaws. There's a way where even if Outlaws get the first gap, a Shock almost immediately retake point control if this hook hits. Now that his hook misses, that's the cue for Linkster. Now Linkster feels good about himself. He feels comfortable to take this duel. At the same time, on the other side of the map, as you can see, Boink noticed Violet out of position. Dante is joining him to pressure. The rest of the team has already backed off. So now Choi realizes now that he kind of has to help Violet, but now everyone's really, really split. So Violet not being on the same page there kind of hurts the team. Choi leaves to try and help Violet. Linkster, even though there's no hook on Super is still super tanky, and he also gets a bubble from Sinatra here. So Linkster's in a lot of trouble now, and Linkster also doesn't have his cooldowns. So when Linkster dropped here and tried to hit Super for a little bit of ult charge, completely fine to do, but you need to have your uppercut back, because now, as you can see, Linkster does not have his uppercut. If he had his uppercut, he could have easily escaped, played above Super. He's fine. So a little bit greedy by Linkster here. Gonna cost him his life. But thankfully, Violet was also out of position. Jake can again follow up with the rocket as Choi is trying to push these guys off. Jake reacts to the call on Violet and finishes off Violet. So even though Linkster dies there, still you've traded 2 for 1. You're still good here. And also Choi, because of Violet's misposition, Choi sacrifices a lot of his HP. There's no real way to save him here either. Dante gets a lot of free ult charge, so yeah. And now you just clean up. Now, on the retake, win conditions don't really change here. Now Super goes to Winston and Violet goes to Moira. So once again, you see, if you lose the first fight and you're not playing the right composition, this is how volatile control is, because you've just lost the first fight and you reset your ultimates on your flex support and your main tank. So it's going to be very difficult for you to get these ultimates up in this round. It's going to take a long time. Still very difficult for Sinatra to really do much here. Let's see, how much energy does he have? He has quite a bit of energy off of bubbling Super. He's potentially caught a couple of rockets here from Jake as well. But still difficult for him to get ult charge. You see, like, he's charged, but he's only at 22%. There's only one tank on the side of Outlaws, and he's most likely playing as far away from you as possible. So difficult for Sinatra to do stuff as well until you close that distance. So let's see how this plays out. You see, Muma's backing off here once again. Just playing a diagonal angle. And if you look at the positioning, you can see this is where the split happens for the Shock. And once again, this is part of the plan. This is what you want to do. Because if the entirety of the Shock goes this way, Muma can just flip the map and go this way. And you're going to be pressured by Jake all the way through. And eventually Jake is going to find a kill. Eventually Linkster can find a kill. You know, Dante's going to find a hack as you're dancing around the map like this. So if you're Muma, you just want to buy time. Shock obviously want to cut this off by sending the main group here, and then Super comes in from an off angle, pincers Muma and cuts off the rotation, stops him for just long enough so that the rest of the team can catch up. So this is what this position tells us. Now, Jake's job, just pressure the main group, make sure you draw out resources. Linkster's and Dante's job, make sure that the Shock cannot execute their win condition, because Jake doesn't want to be pressuring Winston. He wants to be hitting as many people as possible in this group. So now it's up to Dante and Linkster to mark this monkey who is freelancing. He's going to be a little bit on his own. So you need to make sure that he doesn't get to this flank angle and get, you just don't want to make sure that he doesn't walk up to Muma without using any cooldowns. You can see that Dante does just that. He comes out, he starts pressuring. Jake is pressuring the main group. You force out the bubble from Super. Super also jumps to try and finish off the kill on Dante, but Dante translocates out. And now Linkster once again comfortable taking this duel. Like I said, mid-fight he can do quite a lot of stuff if people are isolated. Now Super doesn't have any cooldowns, so Linkster feels comfortable to potentially go in here and try and force a little bit of a duel. Boink joins him as well. And all of this slows the Shock down, because now they know that Super is in trouble. Outlaws have been pressuring him. Now the entirety of that group kind of turns around. Moth has also already used his amp. So he uses his amp because he wants his team to go this way, but Super is not ready. If Super was ready, you could potentially pincer Muma here. But now this is really just a waste of an amp. The rest of the team, like I said, turns around to try and help Super. Everyone kites back, slows down the momentum Shock by a ton. We have Super getting healed up. Now he's safe and he's ready to jump. But there are ultimates on the side of the Outlaws. Muma pops his bongos here to provide even more pressure on the front line, do a ton of damage. Jake has his ultimate as well. A lot of ultimates coming up on the Outlaws here. So even though the Shock have potential to cut off Muma here, they also don't have full resources. They don't have amp. You're running out of heals if you're Violet. A lot of resources used up here. If you're Sinatra, you don't have your self bubble for the next 10 seconds, so you're not going into this pincer move that healthy. You still don't have a lot of cooldowns, whereas the Outlaws are fine. So this bongos does provide a ton of pressure. Now once again, Dante, very good positioning here to cut off the rotation. This translocator placement, very nice. He's immediately back in the fight from an off angle, as the rest of the team is going to be focused on diving on Muma. You're going to have Jake pressuring you from above, and you're going to have Dante bothering you from an off angle. So very nice setup here again. And again, Linkster just pretty much AFK, waiting, biding his time, seeing if he can do something mid-fight. Now Violet shifts in to try and come in and pressure. He does not really have any cooldowns anymore. Moth gets rehacked here. He doesn't have amp anyways, but still, you don't have the boop. One less threat for Muma to worry about. And yeah, Dante, very good. Pops right in and gets Moth here. Super does jump in, so this is the pincer move happening, but once again, not very healthy here if you're the Shock. You've lost your speed, Sinatra can't close the distance, Choi is flying up at Jake here, but he pretty much has no matrix left, and Jake knows this. Like Jake has been counting this matrix. He knows that Choi used it to cross all the way here, so he knows that even as Choi is trying to bother Jake and pressure him up in the air, he doesn't have matrix. So this is a perfect opportunity for Jake to just drop with his ultimate. Terrific angle here. He also knows that Violet has just used his shift, so he is an easy target. Moth has no speed boost, so he's essentially immobilized. All of these three supports that are caught in this position, they have no mobility, they have no way to escape. Boink, nice little boop also here, I believe to set this up. And there we go. You accomplish everything you need. While Linkster's essentially served as Muma's bodyguard. Super was the only one who could actually connect on Muma. Linkster just came in and peeled Super off Muma. Muma really took no damage, and the fight is over. And you can see, very hard to farm ultimates here. If you're the Shock, you're still Choi gets staggered as well. You have so many ultimates here for the Outlaws. Win condition again doesn't change. You're going to still pressure the same way. You have a lot of peeling ultimate. You essentially peeled off, you exhausted resources and you peeled off the dive of the Shock with a barrage and a bongos. Now you can do the same with an EMP and Linkster's ultimate. And eventually Boink is going to hit his ultimate too. So take a look at this fight. So now again, Violet freelancing a little bit here, just going in ahead of his team. Starts getting pressured by Dante, gets his shift forced out. Moth has to come in and help. So the three supports are there, but still not that big of a deal here. Now Sinatra is now put in a position where he is the one. Let's see, does he have any energy? No, he's starting with 0. But he's essentially put in a situation where he's making the pincer move here on Muma. He's going to cut off his rotation while the rest of the team is coming. Presumably the tanks are going to try to jump over, and the supports are just rotating this way through while also forcing away Dante. So even though like Violet was freelance here a little bit, he's a little bit ahead of the team. He also forces Dante out of stealth, which is very important because Dante needs to be sort of around here to be able to EMP this dive. As long as he's here ready to EMP and protect Muma in time, the Outlaws 100-0 this, and the first round is over. But Dante's Translocator is a little bit too far away. Dante's Translocator is here, so he's not quite ready to come in here with his EMP. And this is a perfect opening for the shock. As you can see, Super's jumping in, catches Linkser, and forces out. And he forces out Linkser's ultimate. So one of the peeling ultimates already out for the shock. I mean for the Outlaws. And once again, you see Dante's is trailing the plate by just a little bit. If his Translocator was maybe in this position, he could have immediately popped out here and EMP'd all of these guys and potentially saved Muma. But now Muma, as you can see, is pincered in. Finally, Shock can manage to do what they've been trying to do all along. And now they can just brawl and potentially win this. Boink trying to peel gets bashed. Muma gets booped down. And once again, all of this can be prevented if the timing is a little bit better, if Dante is ready for the EMP, but now rightfully so, Dante just holds the EMP. And you get Choi's ultimate as well. So obviously you have a great chance to 100-0 here if you're the Outlaws, but not the end of the world because you did force out the bomb as well. But it is very difficult to retake with the Pharah, and it's very difficult to retake into this particular composition of the shock. So this could very easily be a complete turn, 100-93 in Shock's favor. But the Outlaws have one more chance. If Outlaws don't win this next retake and commit all of these ultimates, the round is pretty much over and Shock wins. So this is the only time they have a chance to make something happen. And once again, if the Outlaws change the composition here, if Raucus and Jake swap up, you're resisting 2 of your ultimates, you're putting yourself behind, you're pushing into Shock, who have 5 ultimates. So really, don't mind the choice of staying with this composition. Muma obviously going over to the Winston, and Jake and Raucus trying to see if they can get something done with their ultimates. And let's see, Dante has his EMP, so you have the EMP barrage combo here. You want to try and set it up in some kind of a way. Very nice here by Boink and Linkser to clear this high ground. Make sure that you force off the tanks. You funnel everyone closer together. Much easier for Dante to land an EMP. But as you can see, very spread. Very hard for Dante to find a good EMP. Do go for these supports. Very risky. These 2 guys you can't really follow up on. The tanks, one is on high ground, one is below. So difficult for Dante to find an EMP here until someone else is grouped. But in reality, you're only playing to set up Jake. So the way you set up Jake is you try and get a hack on the Diva. And Linkser forces the... Linkser and Boink force Super down. And you can see Dante is looking around here. He is seeing what he can get. And he's looking for the tanks. And rightfully so. And this is where the mistake happens. Choi can never get EMP'd here. Not together with Super. One of them needs to dodge it. So good job by Outlaws for funneling it. And yeah, you can see Super is trying to dodge it. Choi gets a bubble here, but yeah, the EMP goes through. So now you have a very nice window here if you're Jake for the barrage. Choi also gets demeched. The entirety of the team focuses him down with the Raucus' ult. And now Jake is coming over the top here. And a terrific angle here for Jake. Everyone's been funneled in. The tanks have been forced out and everyone's grouped up here. These guys have grouped up because they have to help the front line. So now you have a great angle for Jake where, 1, you don't have Choi who isn't... Choi doesn't have mech. Number 2, you still have a hack on Super. And number 3, Boink is beating. So you have a gigantic cushion here if you're Jake to go for this barrage, all the freedom in the world, and also a good angle. So naturally, you're always going to get value with this setup. Almost impossible for Moth to really react on this. And after this is just pretty much just cleanup for the Outlaws. You just end up killing off the staggers. Now, once again, very interesting to see what compositions both teams go for. Again, being the Outlaws, being the fact that you're playing the funky compositions, you kind of have the edge on Shock, who just want to force 3-3, who know that they have the advantage in the 3-3 matchup. And as you can see, Shock, again, not rolling out on Goats. They know that Outlaws will never give them the mirror. They actually roll out with Violet on the Moira, which would suggest that maybe they're expecting the Outlaws to run some kind of DPS composition, and sort of their pathing shows that too. They're hiding their composition. You would hide here, and then eventually when the point opens, you would go in and pressure the point and just get the cap for free against any kind of a poke composition. Because of what Houston ran in the previous round, they continue to be unpredictable, and they force this composition from the Shock. Shock feel like this is probably going to give them the best chance to win the first fight, whether the Outlaws are rolling out with Dante on the Sombra and the Outlaws on the Sombra Goats, or if you're if you're just, even if you have a 3-3 mirror, which you'll never have, it's not that big of a deal. Violet can just go and swap, and then you have the favorable matchup. Or if the Outlaws are playing DPS compositions, once again, Moira is a good choice here. So Shock, wait a little bit. They end up seeing the composition right about now, and when they see Sombra 3-3, they move up and they start taking some map control. Now, again, the Outlaws, they will never engage here. They will never leave high ground until they have some kind of a significant advantage. They will even let Shock go to the point and capture it while they're farming up their EMP, unless, again, they find some kind of a big opening. Now, again, Moira, not as good as the Zen. You do not have the Transcendence for Linkster's Gravitons, but you still can get a lot of value out of this hero because there is no Matrix on the Outlaws. You can throw in your orbs, especially in a neutral fight, but eventually you do want to transition this to a Zen or to an Ana or something of that sort, because the ultimate really isn't that strong. So let's see how this plays out. We can see Boink taking the high ground above here. We see Dante taking the off angle on the point. And the Outlaws are just going to wait and poke away and see if they can force out an error. Now, Dante pokes out here. Gets the armor pack from Jake. And Dante gets a very nice angle here on Violet. So Violet is starting to get chunked here. And there is kill potential here. So Rascal, if Rascal just uses his armor pack, you're still fine here if you're the Shock. However, if you watch Rascal, he tries to armor pack Violet, but unfortunately Moth jumps in his way. And this is huge, because now you've missed your armor pack. This means that Violet has to use his orb, one of his major cooldowns, to heal himself. So you've, just by this pressure from Dante, just by hitting, not only by hitting someone, but by hitting Violet like this, and Rascal missing his armor pack, you forced out 2 major cooldowns. And this is huge too. The fact that Dante finds this hack on Choi. Just barely sneaks the hack in. And now this is a good enough opening for the Shock, for the Outlaws, right? You don't have the Matrix to worry about. Means that Raucus is a lot more dangerous. He can hit biotic grenades, potential anti-nades, especially with Super a little bit split from the rest of the team. You can definitely catch Super here if you make a quick move, especially while Dante is still holding a strong position over here. Let's see, where did we have Boink? Where did Boink go? Boink is still here as well. He's ready to displace Super as well. So this is a very good opening that the Outlaws sort of forced out and sort of stumbled into. A lot of fortunate kind of breaks to lead to this. But now Super steps under them, and this is the cue. Now the Shock know that they have the edge here. They can drop on him, they can look for a nade, and they can potentially find this kill. And that's exactly what they do. They bubble, and Super falls over even before the Bayada grenade hits. But Rascal, trying to save him, obviously gets hit by this grenade, since Choi still hacked. So good realization by the Outlaws that they do not have to give up the point here. They have created a very good scenario for themselves, and they can just clean this up. And they do get the first gap. Dante also gets a lot of ult charge, and once again, he's looking for these hacks in spawn. He's trying to get the guys who are trailing behind. And he does, once again, get the hack just barely on Choi. He can't really farm on Choi. Choi is already around the corner, but still. The rest of the Shock who are pathing top now drop to the bottom to make sure they protect Choi, to make sure that they help him cross. So Dante doesn't get a lot of ult charge, but forces everyone to rotate down on the ground. And you could argue that perhaps the Shock want to do this anyway. Maybe they just want to get to the point really quickly, hoping that Dante doesn't have his ultimate yet. They just want to push away from Dante, you know, get a point, heal up. That's where you have the advantage still if you're the Shock, because you do have a diva. So might be the case. However, Dante, good translocator placement. He translocates basically in a position where he can immediately contribute to the fight as well. Not that big of a deal. Boink can threaten with the boop here still. Outlaws will never try to force a fight here, but they can. They are soft holding this corner because Boink has good position, and they can still look for a lucky pick and at least force out cooldowns, and they do. Violet goes very low. He uses his damage orb here, I do believe. So both sports are very low, and you almost got to pick. But still, the Outlaws can't really contest this too hard. They're still waiting for Dante to get his ultimate. So really, there's no need to get greedy here if you're the Outlaws. Just wait for Dante to get his ultimate. It's fine. Shock have already secured positions on the point. Let them get the cap off. You don't have to force anything. But Boink here overextends quite a bit. He seems to be ahead of the play. You know, he steps way in front of Muma's shield. Tank puts himself in a position where a lot of people can shoot him, and he almost feeds here. Same thing with Jake, both of them. But thankfully, Jake reacts in time and armors Boink to save him. So this armor pack is huge because this could potentially have been fatal. You still lose the point, but again, doesn't matter. You're gonna get it back really quickly. You have your EMP, and this is something that has been very impressive with the Outlaws, is how well they time their EMP shatters. They almost come out at the same time, almost instantly. So very good communication between Muma and Dante to set these up, and good trust. So yeah, you give up a couple of percentage points, not that big of a deal. Use your EMP shatter. You still have a lot of ultimates to work in the next fight. Dante moves up here as well, tries to pressure. Now the Shock path top, or a couple of them path top, and then they drop. So this is important too, because this position is very nice for Linkster and Dante. If you don't force them down, like at this point, Linkster drops, but if you don't force Dante off of this position, then very nice crossfire for Dante. As the rest of his team is falling back, Dante can just shoot them in the back. Now the Shock don't have a lot of ultimates. They can still engage here with their beam, but the Outlaws, once again, as we talked about on NEPAL, they are using their ultimates to basically maintain. They're going to have to give up space, and they're going to have to use ultimates to keep that space. And they do have a lot to do that. They have Jake's Rally to potentially slow down the forward pressure of the Shock. They have Linkster's Grab if they need to. Rockets is coming up on a not a boost, and all at the same time, Dante is holding this position. So you can potentially pivot around this area if you're the Outlaws and get a lot of value out of your ultimates here. So let's take a look how it plays out. Once again, very nice hack by Dante. And again, this hack, Dante probably can't get if you path top and you force him off of this position. If you force Dante to to play below, the second best position that Dante could take in that situation is this, and this is the angle you need to be watching for potentially, or this angle. But on high ground, he can pick and choose and hack whoever he wants. So even though you do use, Violet does use his ultimate here, Moth is hacked, so very difficult for you to close distance. If you're the Shock, Jake, as mentioned, uses his rally to just keep the space. And Dante is very, very safe here. Gets a lot done, gets a lot of Volt Charge, forces Violet to beam him instead of Muma. So again, this position relieves a lot of pressure from the front line as well. Jake can afford to be a little more aggressive here. He has the rally, Rascal doesn't. So he's also pressuring here and drawing some aggression. So yeah, a nice little crossfire, this time with a break that the Outlaws have set up. And now Linkster is coming up on a Graviton too. So once again, Violet, not on the Zen. We don't have the Trance. Can get a lot more value out of your Gravitons if you're the Outlaws. Now this is a little unfortunate for Boink. I'm going to actually replay that because that was pretty funny. So this was a little bit funny. Boink gets back on point. And he moves to this side and catches a little bit of damage from Violet's damage orb here. He does boop back Super Sinatra, which is nice. Slows down their progress. Dodges the Fire Strike, which would have potentially killed him. But obviously he can't stay here because of the damage orb. He has to go this way. Violet is beaming him from that side, so very difficult for him to position himself anywhere where he could be safe. Tries to move out of the LOS of Violet, so he doesn't die, but obviously the orb, lucky little bounce in this corner, heads straight towards Boink, and Boink ends up dying. So a little bit of a comical sequence, but still, the Outlaws are fine here, as long as the Shatter doesn't hit. It doesn't. Muma blocks both the Shatter and Rascal's Bash. Two major cooldowns and ultimates used there. Linkster, free to grab. Once again, no Transcendence, no supportals for the Shock. Moth's ultimate also charges a little slower, both because he's been hacked, but also because Violet heals up most of the damage, so the Lucio doesn't get his ult charge that fast either. So really, you can just clean this up if you're the Outlaws. And again, when Muma is nanoed, he has a lot more freedom to swing into these grabs. Again, no Discord either on the side of the Shock, so gives Muma a lot more freedom. Like, Muma can be a lot more aggressive against the Moira. Now, heading into this fight, not a lot of ultimates for the Outlaws. You don't have your grab, you don't have the EMP. Maybe you can get the EMP towards the end of the fight, but really, if you look at the ultimates, you're losing this fight. If you're the Shock, you're trying to get off your ultimates as soon as possible. Once again, you don't know how close Dante is to his ultimate. Maybe you kind of peg it at right around where he is right now at 70%. So you still want Rascal and Sinatra to try and get their ultimates off and win this fight fast. You don't want to give Outlaws time to farm these ultimates up. Now, the Shock actually path top, which means they'll be able to deny that nice little angle for Dante. They won't let him play on the high ground. Dante pivots with his Translocator over there. A little far away from the fight, but not terrible. Huge boop here by Boink. So Rascal does get his rally off. He pops it immediately. They want to try and engage, but this boop gives Outlaws, it doesn't really win them the fight or give them a lot, but it just buys them a little more time, because now the Shock has to close a larger distance. And Dante, again, this is pretty much the second best angle that he can take. He does get the hack on Choi. Obviously, it would have been nice to maybe get it on Moth, but Moth isn't available for a hack here. Maybe if you get it on Moth, you can kite even longer and stall out the fight even longer if you're the Outlaws, but still not a bad hack on Choi. Forces a 1v1 against Choi there. So essentially, we have a 5v5 here, while Dante just farms his ultimate on the side. And again, no real tools to win this fight for the Outlaws, unless the Shock makes a critical mistake. Good little grab on the pointer by Sinatra, and you close this out. But you didn't use anything. If you're the Outlaws, you're still in one fight territory to win the map. You forced out the grab, you forced out the rally. Again, the two biggest engagement tools for the GOATS composition, and you are coming back here with fully loaded. You have your EMP, you have almost have your rally, you have your Shatter. Linksters, if the fight drags out, Linkster's gonna get his ult. Brockus and Boink are also gonna come up with their ultimates. So a lot of ways for the Outlaws to win this fight here again. And once again, look at the spacing. Shock very much afraid of the EMP. Moth hides. He wants to try and block this EMP, and very, very hard for Dante to find anything here. So once again, he needs his team to manufacture a scenario in which he can get more value out of his EMP. So he can't really lead this fight with EMP. But at the same time, the positioning for the Shock, they're not really in a great position to protect Super either. They can all still pounce and potentially help him, but it's not optimal. They can't really be super aggressive from these positions. And especially since Moth, he can't really be in the fight. He can't speed Super back. So that is crucial as well, because Super doesn't have a lot of mobility here. Orb is also out for Violet, so a big healing resource out of the fight already. And the Outlaws just choose to push Super with the nano boost. Again, you don't have a great brawling composition, but with the nano, Muma can do a lot more. Once again, Violet doesn't have a Discord on Muma, and Muma is just a lot more free against this comp. Jake also finds a nice bash on Violet to pressure him. Forces Violet to shift here as well. Nice little play. And Choi uses ultimate. So a lot of ultimates coming out for Shock just to try and salvage it. Because if you think about it, once again, all of the players on the Shock side, they can have their ultimate taken away by the Samurai at a moment's notice. So since Moth can't beat, because that's immediately going to be EMP'd off by Dante, everyone else kind of has to make some kind of a play with their ultimate. So now Violet uses his ultimate to sort of save Super, and then Choi tries to go for a miracle play and get something with his bomb as well to help Super, because Super's going to be under a lot of pressure, but maybe this bomb can zone the Outlaws out a bit. As you can see, that's what it's doing. Rockus has to hide, Linkster has to hide a little bit. Maybe he can buy time for Super to survive. Maybe the Outlaws can make a mistake here. And that almost happens, because Jake gets pushed here by Rascal. Now, Jake does have Rally, and Rascal doesn't. So as long as he gets his Rally off and survives and keeps this fight 1v1, he's fine. And he backs off. He does use his Rally, and he backs off into a location where it is a 1v1 against Rascal. Violet still focused on Super. If Violet could potentially get an angle on Jake, Jake could die, and this could be a fight win for Shock. So very, very close margins here. For the Outlaws. And once again, Jake, good play to force out the shift, but then the Diva Bomb that just exploded relieved pressure on Super, but also put Jake in a position where he can't really, this is the only path that he can really take to dodge the bomb. And Rascal tried to punish it, but again, Jake pops the Rally, gets the mini, and now he's winning this duel. Rascal immediately turns around, he wants none of this, and Jake is fine. Now, there's so much pressure here on the front line. Super is almost dying, and then Boink also uses his ultimate so that the Outlaws can continue pressuring forward here. Once again, you know that you're ahead in ults. The only thing that's left on the board for the Shock is the beat, so you can just use your beat and keep pressuring and force out that mistake, because you're just so ahead in the ult economy here. If we see where Dante is, let's see, where is the Dante? So Dante's Translocator placement can't have been very good, because he's very, very far out of the fight. So this is a little awkward, because if a beat would come out from Moth now, Dante could potentially be out of position to EMP that, and you might be in trouble. You might lose this fight that way if you're the Outlaws. But Moth probably has no idea that Dante is that far away. He still has to be scared. He still has to assume that Dante maybe has his Translocator somewhere around here and can immediately come back into the fight. So let's see how this continues to transpire. Moth comes out to try and help Super a little bit and immediately takes cover again. He's still hiding. He's still afraid for that EMP. Super does get topped off, so you sort of weathered the storm a little bit here. If you're the Shock, but you still have an ace in your hand in terms of Dante's EMP here. And because the EMP hasn't come out yet, once again, after all these initial ultimates have been used, you can see how the Shock is trying to split to avoid it. Moth trying to dodge it here. And once again, I want to continue to give credit to Dante and Muma, because their synergy on this combo is really, really good. Let's see. We also have a very nice bash on Super here by by Jake, which allows them to chunk him a little bit. But look at the timing. So we're playing this at 0.25% speed, but look at how the Shatter and the EMP come out here. Almost at the same time. Perhaps Muma shattered on Jake's bash as well, but still, you can see how nice the timing is. It's completely impossible for Moth to react to this and save his teammates. So you get the beat and you get 2 kills, and now you just essentially close the map out. Now the Shark have to essentially pick stall heroes, try and touch point, but there's really no way of coming back into this game. And there it is. The Outlaws ended up making the correct adjustments following Horizon and Eichenwalde and executed their compositions very well. The Shock did make some unconventional mistakes, but Houston also managed to make the Stage 2 champions very uncomfortable, especially with their funky compositions on the 2 control maps. Everyone on the Outlaws mostly played very well across the board, with Raucus making several map-winning plays on Nepal and Dante being nearly flawless on his Sombra throughout. Thanks for watching, guys. To keep supporting this type of content and the channel, hit the magical subscribe and like buttons. Also, make sure you hop onto the Mineral Miners Discord to join the community and potentially take advantage of some coaching. You can find the link in the description box down below.